Chapter 14-17. Gu Xingyi knew that it was the merit that was stopping her from moving forward. In fact, the heavenly axiom was involved as well. Deep within her soul, she could hear the rumbling of thunder. That was the heavenly Tao's doing to stop her. However, she had already come this far. How could Gu Xingyi give up? She gave a cold harumph, and a soul power that was even stronger than that of the Grim Reaper burst forth, destroying all obstructions like crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. She forcefully erased the mark on the light of destiny. It was a power that belonged to her own soul. Then, she wrote a new mark on the golden pillar of light word by word: Xiao Zhihe, male, famous painter. Wealthy and peaceful for life, died at age 80. On the other thin line, He Qing's name appeared: He Qing, female, committed countless evil deeds, died at age 31. Gu Xingyi was practically forced out. She looked at the sky above her. The sky of the netherworld, which had always been calm and cold, was filled with dark clouds and thunder. It was as though something was erupting with a powerful rage. Gu Xingyi knew that the heavenly Tao was angry. However, what did that matter? Didn't the heavenly Tao only recognize fate? She had already done what she wanted to do. Fresh blood trickled down from the corners of her mouth. It was as though a raging fire was burning within her body. It was also as though a cold winter wind was slicing her internal organs. That was the heavenly Tao punishing the Grim Reaper for daring to defy it. Gu Xingyi sensed her life force and power flowing away rapidly. She closed her eyes in exhaustion. System, leave this world. At the same time, Xiao Zhihe and He Qing both sensed that something was amiss. It was as though something had quietly left their bodies. Xiao Zhihe looked at the drop of red paint on the drawing paper and pursed his lips. Then, he threw the drawing, which was almost completed, into the wastepaper basket. He Qing, who was standing guard before the man's window, received a call from the police. Without the power of merit, her crude methods of committing crimes could not be concealed. He Qing was taken away by the police. But before they could interrogate him, the police car carrying the most important suspect in the serial murder case was involved in a car accident. The most surprising thing was that the police officers in the car were only hurt by love, but the female suspect died on the spot. Later, the evidence was conclusive. Those cases were all committed by this woman. When the public found out about it, they all said that this was retribution. This person had committed too many sins. Even the heavens could not bear to watch anymore. Xiao Zhihe also saw the news. When he saw it, the first thing he thought of was to share it with Sister Death. But he hadn't seen Sister Death in a long time. Sister Death said that she had something important to do in the underworld and would not be back for a long time. But how long would it take? It was the 14th of July, the day when the gates of hell would open. However, very few people in the city believed this person. The light turned green. Xiao Zhihe was walking on the sidewalk. He was going to the paint shop across the street to buy a few boxes of his usual pigments. Ah! He turned around and saw that a car's brakes seemed to have malfunctioned. The car was speeding toward him at a speed that he could not avoid. It's over. At that moment, he was thinking that he would be able to see Sister Death. But for some unknown reason, just as the car was about to make contact with him, the car's tires suddenly skidded. It made a turn and charged toward the green belt beside him. Xiao Zhihe was not hurt at all. However, when he looked at the car, he felt as if something had left his body for a moment. Chapter 14-18. The driver was also fine. When he climbed out of the car and saw the unscathed Xiao Zhihe, his expression was as if he was about to cry. He was scared half to death just now. If he ran the red light and killed someone, he would have no hope in this life. Fortunately, God protected him. He ignored Xiao Zhihe's refusal and stuffed a large sum of money into his mouth, saying that if Xiao Zhihe didn't accept it, his heart would feel uneasy. Xiao Zhihe finally accepted the money and put this matter to the back of his mind. Many years later, Xiao Zhihe became a very famous painter. He was very young, didn't have any bad habits, and kept himself clean. He also had a face that could be called a male god. Most importantly, he didn't have a girlfriend. Such a man was simply the dream lover of countless women. His paintings could be sold for a very high price, but still, no one had ever seen him paint any portraits. His competitors attacked him, and his admirers offered him tens of millions of dollars to paint his portrait, but he never paid any attention to them. No one knew that in his villa, there was a room that only he could open. When the light was turned on, one could see a full easel. The contents of these easels, at a glance, could be seen to be the same person. Black cloak, black scythe, unable to see the face clearly. This image was the majority. And a few of the portraits had a delicate beauty, but her hair and pupil color were somewhat different from humans. In a few of the portraits, this person even had a pair of gorgeous black wings on her body. These portraits were vivid and lifelike. The movements and expressions of the people in the portraits, and even the eyes, seemed to be transmitted through the painting paper. As long as one saw these paintings, one would know that the famous painter Qiao Zhihe was not good at painting people. It was absolutely nonsense. The level of these paintings even surpassed several of his works that were sold for sky-high prices. Qiao Zhihe stretched out his hand and gently stroked a painting. His movements were very gentle, so gentle that it was as if he wasn't stroking a painting at all, but the owner of the painting. Death Sister. Qiao Zhihe, who had grown into a mature man, softly called her. 11 years, 3 months, and 13 days. You said that you had things to do and wouldn't come for a long time. But that's really too long. He looked at the paintings with a gentle gaze. Actually, I decided to draw because of you. I want to draw your appearance, and your movements. Everything is on the drawing board. Of course, only I could see it. The first person I want to draw is you. That's why before I have absolute confidence, I've never drawn a portrait because I'm afraid that the work I draw will tarnish your image. Now, I'm able to draw something that satisfies me. I want to show you my work. But, Sister Death, why don't you come back and see me? Since 11 years ago, no, since before that. In his heart, he had been thinking that when he could draw her perfectly, he would bring his work to confess to her. He was a painter, so he confessed in the form of a painter. He infused all his emotions and desires into these paintings. One only needed to take a look to know how much affection he had for the people on it. Chapter 14:19. It was just that he had painstakingly studied the art of painting, and when he finally felt that he could show it off, the person who watched him painting was no longer there. Qiao Zhihe stayed in the room alone for a long time. This was his habit. He would probably stay here alone for a while every week. Finally, he sighed softly, locked the door again, and went out. The weather this afternoon was very good. Qiao Zhihe put on his hat and went out with his drawing board. He planned to go to a famous Lakeview Park in the city today, hoping to find some inspiration. It wasn't the weekend and it was the afternoon, so there weren't many people in the park. Qiao Zhihe had just sat down when an old man beside him said, "Young man, are you interested in having your fortune told?" Only then did Qiao Zhihe notice that there was a white cloth at the old man's feet. On it was written, "Divine Fortune Telling." However, he didn't believe in such things, so he shook his head and refused. The old man looked at him and didn't force him. Another half an hour passed, but no one came over. Perhaps the old man felt bored, so he said, "Young man, since I have nothing to do, how about I tell your fortune for you?" He seemed to be afraid that Qiao Zhihe would refuse, so he said, "This old man is just bored today, so I came out for a walk. It's fate that I met you, so I won't take your fortune-telling fee." Qiao Zhihe felt that it wasn't good to disappoint an old man who had called him twice, so he put down the pen in his hand and walked in front of the old man. "Do I need to do anything?" he asked. The old man shook his head and looked at him carefully. With this look, he frowned. The glabella is connected to the glabella, but the qi is scattered and not gathered. This is clearly the sign of a short life. That's not right. He looked at Qiao Zhihe as if he had seen something extremely rare. Qiao Zhihe felt a little uncomfortable being looked at like this, so he asked what was wrong. The old man looked at him and said, "Looking at your face, it's clearly the sign of a short life. However, I don't know which powerful person went against the heavenly Tao and changed your fate, forcibly changing your fate to one of good fortune and longevity. Moreover, this fate was clearly taken from someone else. However, this young man didn't have any evil creatures on him, which meant that the person who took it wasn't a good person. When Xiao Zhihe heard his words, he was a little unhappy. He took out a stack of money from his wallet and handed it to the old man. Old man, since you're a fortune teller, it's better to say something auspicious. Otherwise, as soon as the old man heard this, he knew what he was thinking. It was obvious that he didn't trust him. He didn't take Xiao Zhihe's money either. He coldly snorted and said, "Young man, do you think I'm a swindler who only knows how to run his mouth? According to what I've seen, when you were 17 years old, there was a great calamity in your life that should have taken your life. It should be the middle of July when the yin qi is at its heaviest. Think about it, did you encounter something thrilling but didn't lose your life?" Hearing the old man's words, Xiao Zhihe seemed to recall the time when he was almost hit by a car. In his heart, he was already starting to believe it. How could there be such a coincidence in this world? Looking at his expression, the old man knew that he had guessed correctly. He continued, "I don't know what kind of person would actually risk being punished by the heavenly Tao to defy the heavens and change your fate. This old man is sincerely convinced by such means." Chapter 14:20. When Xiao Zhihe heard this, his heart trembled for some reason. "Old sir, is it very difficult to change one's fate against the heavens?" he asked. The old man looked at him and said, "Is it? Changing a person's innate fate into another, allowing a person who was supposed to be dead to live again and live a better life than most people. Do you think it's difficult?" After that, he said to himself, "Wuxia is really full of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. I used to think that I was already one of the best, but I didn't expect there to be such a master. This is simply a supernatural power. What a ghostly divine ability." Xiao Zhihe's body shook. He suddenly remembered that one night many years ago, Sister Death brought him to the top of a mountain. There, he saw the most beautiful night scene in his life. At that time, Sister Death asked him, "If you knew that you were going to die one day, what would you think?" How did he answer at that time? He said that he was not reconciled. He remembered that she didn't say anything at that time. A few days later, she told him, "You will become a very famous painter and live a peaceful and rich life." Why didn't he think about it at that time? If there was really nothing, why would Sister Death suddenly ask such a question and emphasize such words? At this time, the old man opposite him asked, "Young man, do you know the master who changed your fate? Can you introduce me to such a master? I must pay him a visit." "Wait, no. After doing such a thing, the heavenly axiom will not let him go. The heavenly axiom will not let him go." This sentence was like a thunderbolt, ringing in Xiao Zhihe's mind. He heard his own dry voice, "Sir, if I forcefully change my fate, that person. What will happen to him?" Xiao Zhihe thought that his face must be very ugly now, because the old man opposite him looked at him with sympathy and worry. He said, "Changing your fate against the heavenly axiom will destroy all your cultivation and become disabled. In the worst case, you will be turned into ashes." Xiao Zhihe's vision went dark. "I have something very important to do in the underworld. I may not come to see you for a long time." So, the so-called important matter was actually like this? Xiao Zhihe did not ask what would happen if the one who changed someone's fate was not a human, but a god of death. He was afraid of hearing the consequences that he didn't want to hear. With a dazed expression, he packed up his things and walked back. Do not ask, do not listen. In that case, he could treat it as if Sister Death had only received some punishment, and she had only returned to the underworld to recuperate or do something else. As long as he waited patiently, he would be able to wait for her. He did not see the pitiful gaze of the old man behind him. In his entire life, Xiao Zhihe had never met the person he was waiting for. Just like what Sister Death had said, he lived a peaceful, prosperous, and healthy life. His life had been smooth sailing. The only thing that puzzled people was that he had never married. It was not strange for an artist not to be married, but what was strange was that this master of the painting world did not even have a confidant in his life. On Xiao Zhihe's 79th birthday, he seemed to have sensed something and held an art exhibition. This art exhibition caused a sensation in the entire painting world. Because this was Master Xiao Zhihe's only portrait art exhibition, and the theme of the art exhibition was only one person. Countless portraits of the god of death filled the art exhibition hall, but no one felt that it was gloomy or terrifying. Under the painting of this master, the god of death had an exquisite and perfect face. Although the expression was cold, deep in the eyes, there was a warmth and gentleness that belonged only to him. Even people who did not understand painting could see the feelings of the painter towards the person in the painting at a glance. This person must be Master Qiao's lover, right? Although they did not know why he set the image of his lover as the god of death, it did not look out of place. Instead, it added a strange sense of beauty. Someone wanted to buy the paintings at a high price, but they were all rejected by Xiao Zhihe. Ever since his birthday, his body began to weaken rapidly. He probably knew that he would not live for long, so he made up his mind to reveal his true feelings to the world before he died. In the 8th month of the year 2393 of the Wuxia calendar, the famous painter Xiao Zhihe passed away at home. Before he died, he made a will that all the assets and paintings under his name, except for the portraits, would be donated to welfare organizations. As for the beautiful paintings that attracted the interest of countless people, they were cremated with his body and no longer remained in the world. Chapter 1421. This was a world that belonged to summoners. Every child in the Kingdom of Warcraft would enter the Empire's public temple of summoning at the age of 5 to awaken their talent. The test results were divided into 3 levels: low-level, mid-level, and high-level. Level 1 to 3 summoners were low-level summoners. Such people may not be able to become a summoner in their lifetime and summon their own magical beast. And even if low-level summoners were lucky enough to summon a magical beast, it was likely to be an ordinary rabbit or turtle, a useless magical beast of little value. Level 4 to 6 summoners were called mid-level summoners. They could summon magical beasts corresponding to their own level. Intermediate summoners were the backbone of any force, and they were also the largest group of summoners. And once the talent was above level 7, they belonged to the high-level summoner camp. High-level summoners were divided into 3 levels: level 7, level 8, and level 9. The higher the summoner's level, the higher the level of the magical beast they could summon. Level 9 summoners could even summon kings of level 9 magical beasts like the Iron Armor Dragon. But in the whole Kingdom of Warcraft, there were very few people who could become high-level summoners. Every time a person with high-level summoner talent appeared, they would be hunted down by all the major forces without exception. Behind every high-level summoner, there was a magical beast with strong fighting power. Such a person deserved to be treated with respect by any force. This was the general background of the mission world that Gu Xingyin came to this time. The mission of this plane was a little different from the previous ones. In the past, the mission characters that she entered were much higher than ordinary people from the beginning. They really explained what it meant to be favored by the heavens. But this world was a little different. This was a female lead who walked the path of trash. Of course, the female lead, Yuan Tianyi, was not a real trash, but a fake trash with the bloodline of ancient summoners. Before Yuan Tianyi's bloodline awakened, in everyone's eyes, she was a trash who couldn't even be considered a low-level summoner. But after her bloodline awakened, those so-called geniuses, in front of her, were not even worthy of carrying her shoes. What was the biggest difference between the ancient summoners and the summoners of today's Kingdom of Warcraft? As everyone knew, every summoner could only draw a summoning spell formation at the age of 14 and summon a contracted magical beast that was compatible with their soul. And the magical beast that was summoned would be the summoner's lifelong companion, and it would also be the summoner's only companion. Every summoner could only have one contracted magical beast. But in the glorious era of the ancient summoners, it wasn't like this. As long as the summoner's soul power was strong enough, she could summon magic beasts without limit. This meant that they could have more than one magic beast. This was the difference. Even if I can't compare to you in terms of numbers, I will still beat you to death one by one. Moreover, there were many exceptional geniuses among the ancient summoners. In terms of talent, those so-called geniuses in the current magical beasts continent could not compare to the ancient geniuses. According to the development of the original plot, Yuan Tianyi was a direct descendant of the Yuan clan of the Dragon Phoenix Empire. Due to her poor talent, she had always been treated coldly by her family. When he was 14 years old, his bloodline awakened, and he successfully summoned the holy beast that had disappeared from the magical beast continent for thousands of years, shocking everyone. After that, he cheated all the way, smoothly killing monsters and leveling up, and finally reached the peak of his life. Chapter 1422. But if that was the case, Gu Shengyin wouldn't have come. Yes. Yuan Tianyi, who was supposed to go all the way to the top, was killed by a cannon fodder who couldn't even be considered a supporting role. Yuan Tianyi was tested to have inferior talent at the age of 5. She might not even be able to summon an ordinary magical beast. Her family had always regarded her as an abandoned child. Naturally, she couldn't receive good treatment. When she was 10 years old, she had a serious illness. That illness was so dangerous that it almost took her life. A little girl who had received her kindness took the risk of leaving the Yuan residence and found a pharmacist for her. Her life was finally saved. However, this little girl was stopped by a young miss from a side branch of the Yuan residence, Yuan Qin. Yuan Qin was born in a remote branch of the Yuan residence. Because she was tested to have intermediate talent at the age of 5, she was taken back by the main family. She studied with the young masters and young misses of the main family, as well as other talented young masters and young misses of the other branches. Although she was also a young miss, there was no doubt that in terms of status, she couldn't be compared with the young masters and young misses of the main branch. So even if she was a summoner with intermediate talent, compared to others, her treatment was very good. But compared to those young masters and young misses of the main branch, it was like the difference between heaven and earth. Was Yuan Qin jealous? Of course, she was jealous. However, she didn't dare to vent her anger on the young masters and young ladies of the Zhen family, because their background was much stronger than her, who was only from a branch family. In such a case, as a direct descendant of the main branch, Yuan Tianyi, who occupied the Tian name, but only had inferior talent, became the target of her venting. In Yuan Qin's view, Yuan Tianyi was so good. She was born a young miss of the main branch, which was an honor that many people couldn't ask for. But she occupied such a good position, but she was just a waste. Yuan Qin thought countless times that if she was in Yuan Tianyi's position, it would be good. Then she would also be a young miss of the main branch. She wouldn't have to force a smile in front of those young masters and young misses of the main branch, just to fight for the resources that fell between their fingers. The more she thought about it, the more she disliked Yuan Tianyi. Yuan Tianyi's temperament was not cowardly, but after all, the situation was stronger than the person. In some aspects, she did not compete with Yuan Qin. In Yuan Qin's eyes, she became the spokesperson for cowardice and did not know how to resist. The more it was like this, the more she wanted to trample Yuan Tianyi under her feet and enjoy the pleasure of comparing the noble young miss of the direct line to dirt. So when she saw the little girl coming out of Yuan Tianyi's courtyard, she stopped her, and when she knew the little girl's intention, she blocked her way. As a young miss of a branch family with some status, it was as easy as flipping her hand for Yuan Qin to imprison the whereabouts of a little servant girl. The little girl was being watched by the guards around her, and Yuan Tianyi, who was in the courtyard, lost her life because of the continuous high fever that couldn't be relieved. When she opened her eyes again, it was Gu Shengyin. Gu Shengyin felt sore all over. She tried to sit up, but found that her whole body was soft and she couldn't summon any strength. Although the high fever had subsided, her body was still very weak. She propped herself up and poured herself a cup of cold water on the only table in the house. The taste of the tea was not good. Thinking about it, an unfavored young miss would not have any good tea here. After drinking a large cup of tea, Gu Shengyin felt that her dry throat was relieved. She began to call the system. Chapter 1423. System, draw a skill. Feeling the weakness in her body, this was the first time Gu Shengyin wished that she could get a good skill. Otherwise, she would have to wait until she was 14 years old before she could awaken the ancient summoner bloodline and summon the sacred beast. 4 years wasn't an easy time. Ding! Congratulations to the host for obtaining the Goddess of Nature's creation skill. Creation? Gu Xingyin frowned. She thought for a bit, then reached out her pale and slender right hand and activated the power of her soul. A faint green light rose from her palm. When the light condensed, a small green fruit appeared in her hand. Gu Xingyin's eyes showed a hint of a smile as she put the fruit into her mouth. The moment the green fruit entered her mouth, it turned into a warm juice and flowed down Gu Xingyin's throat. This body was a bit weak because of the high fever, and her mind was instantly cleared. Finally, she was not that weak anymore. Gu Xingyin smiled with satisfaction. This green fruit was something that had never appeared on this continent before. Green fruit, a fruit that could quickly quench thirst and replenish stamina. In the Western fantasy world, it had always been the favorite of the mercenaries. And when the system did not stop her when she created this small fruit, Gu Xingyin confirmed one of her guesses. Ever since her soul became stronger and stronger, the restrictions and senses of the world's laws on her had decreased. If at the beginning, she used abilities that did not belong to this world, or even took out things that did not belong to this world, the system would definitely remind her. And the world's laws would also notice. What did this mean? It meant that as she became stronger, the influence of these worlds on her became smaller and smaller. In fact, she could even slightly break the rules of the world. For Gu Xingyin, this was good news. She sat quietly for a while, and when she recovered, she felt that her body was a bit uncomfortable. This body had previously experienced a fever. Her body had long been soaked in her own sweat countless times. Now that she was sitting in the room with the windows open and the cold wind blowing, there was an indescribable feeling of stickiness and discomfort. Gu Xingyin walked out of the house. Unsurprisingly, there wasn't even a servant in this small courtyard. As the young miss of the Yuan clan's direct line of descent, she didn't even have a servant in her courtyard. This was against the rules. However, who would be willing to come to a young lady who was born with inferior talent with no future to speak of? Those stewards also turned a blind eye to such matters. They only needed to curry favor with people who needed to be on their good side. Gu Xingyin knew that in a family like the Zhen family where power and benefits were paramount, if you didn't have enough power, you wouldn't have any right to speak. Her footsteps did not stop as she walked towards a certain place. When the head steward of the backyard saw Gu Xingyin, he was stunned for a moment before he realized who she was. "Third Miss, why are you here today?" No one who could become the chief steward was a fool. Even if he looked down on this third young miss in his heart, he would not show the slightest mistake on his face. Only those small stewards with low statuses would seek death in all sorts of ways, fully demonstrating their IQ that needed to be recharged. Chapter 1424. When Gu Xingyin heard his words, she knew that the person in front of her was a smart person. She liked dealing with smart people the most. She raised her face and smiled at the steward. "I've been feeling a little uncomfortable these past 2 days. Today, I finally felt better, so I wanted to see if there was any hot water here for me to take a bath." When the steward heard this, his expression changed greatly. He said to Gu Xingyin, "How could you trouble Third Miss to personally come over for such a young lady?" When he said this, he saw Gu Xingyin's eyes that seemed to be smiling yet not smiling. His heart suddenly trembled. That's right, if there were servants by her side, how could this Third Miss personally come over? His tone changed, and he quickly said, "Does Third Miss want to come in and drink some tea? I'll send someone to bring hot water to Third Miss's courtyard. In addition, I'll send 2 clever maids to Third Miss's courtyard, okay?" "No need." Gu Xingyin looked at the steward and said with a smile, "Thank you for your trouble, steward. It's just that I like peace and quiet, so I don't need 2 more people to disturb me. If steward has the heart, you only need to send someone to bring fresh and slightly warm food to my courtyard every day, as well as clean hot water at sunset every day." The steward felt that although she was only a 10-year-old little girl, this Third Miss's eyes seemed to be able to see through all of his thoughts. This Third Miss, who had always been ignored by everyone, didn't seem to be that simple. While he was still quietly thinking, Gu Xingyin had already lifted her leg and was preparing to leave. She had already said what she wanted to say. Presumably, with this steward's character, he would naturally satisfy all of her requests. The steward narrowed his eyes as he watched the little figure leave. Although the figure was thin and weak, her back was straight. In a trance, the steward felt that he actually felt an aura from this third miss that even the recognized genius, eldest young master Yuan Tianqin, couldn't compare to. He shook his head with a smile, laughing inwardly at himself for being so muddle-headed today. He was actually shocked by a little girl. However, because of this, he kept an eye on Gu Xingyin and paid more attention to him. For the chief steward, this was just a matter of a few words. However, his casual words made Gu Xingyin's life much better. Soon, clean hot water was served. Gu Xingyin took a bath in a good mood. She had just changed her clothes and had not even dried her hair when she heard a familiar voice outside the courtyard. "Is third sister here?" This time, Gu Xingyin recognized who it was. She sat on the stool and wiped her hair with a dry handkerchief, completely ignoring her. That person didn't hear a reply and didn't leave. Instead, he pushed open the door without waiting for the owner for a long time. When she saw Gu Xingyin sitting on a chair and drying her hair, a trace of anger flashed across her face. Big sister shouted so loudly outside the door, but third sister didn't even respond. "What a strong aura," she sneered. Gu Xingyin looked at the girl in front of her. She looked like she was only 11 or 12 years old. She was clearly still at the age of naivety and romance, but her words and actions were like that of an old person. Using such a face with some baby fat to make a sneer wasn't intimidating at all. Instead, it was somewhat laughable. However, although it was laughable, when it was time to slap the face, it still had to be done. Gu Xingyin slowly put down the handkerchief in her hand. Her movements were obviously elegant. Chapter 1425. Her actions seemed to irritate Yuan Qin again. Yuan Qin looked at Gu Xingyin's appearance, and her heart was simply flustered. Just like this. Although her talent was not bad, she knew that for the young masters and young ladies of the branch family, unless they were those with heaven-defying aptitudes and reached the advanced summoner realm, the rest were never taken seriously by the group of people of the direct line. Because this was the capital of the Dragon Phoenix Empire, and the Yuan family was a prominent family in the capital. The upbringing and etiquette that these young masters and young ladies of the direct line received since childhood was not something that the branch family descendants from a remote place could compare to. She even heard two young ladies of the direct line laugh at them as country bumpkins. For this reason, she worked hard to practice etiquette for several months, but at most she could only not lose face. Like Gu Xingyin, who made people feel that her every movement was pleasing to the eye, Yuan Qin could not do it no matter what. Why? She could not compare to those talented young ladies of the direct line, so be it. Why could she not even compare to Yuan Tianyi, this trash? Gu Xingyin very calmly looked at Yuan Qin's angry face that turned white. The more angry she was, the happier Gu Xingyin was. Although she often couldn't understand why some people would get angry over such insignificant things, she still couldn't understand. As if she thought that Yuan Qin was not angry enough, Gu Xingyin raised her face, and looked at Yuan Qin with a very innocent look. "Sister Yuan Qin, I have been sitting here wiping my hair, and other than the sound of Big Black that Brother Tianheng raised next door in the courtyard, I did not hear any other sound." Yuan Qin's face turned from pale to ashen. The Big Black that Yuan Tianheng raised next door was a dog. This trash dared to call her a dog. She subconsciously reached out her hand, and a light yellow light burst out from her palm, directly hitting Gu Xingyin. This light ball looked small, but it was a martial skill in reality. If it hit Gu Xingyin, with her weak body, it was possible that she would directly vomit blood. When Yuan Qin shot, she didn't think that Yuan Tianyi, this waste, would be able to dodge. She was born with inferior talent. Even if she was given a martial skill, she would not be able to learn it in her lifetime. However, Gu Xingyin only took a small step forward and easily dodged Yuan Qin's angry attack. Yuan Qin raised her head and looked at Gu Xingyin in surprise. It was as if she was seeing her for the first time. How did you dodge? Gu Xingyin did not answer her question, but looked directly at Yuan Qin and said, Yuan Qin Jijia, Yuan Tianyi, no matter how bad I am still the Yuan family's upright young miss. The Zhen family had been taught for generations that siblings were not allowed to kill each other. Is Yuan Qin Jijia not taking my Zhen family's rules seriously? Or do you not see yourself as a member of the Yuan family? Yuan Qin suddenly raised her head and stared at Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin did not evade her gaze and looked back at her calmly. Upon closer inspection, there seemed to be a hint of mockery in that gaze. She was looking down on her. Yuan Qin clearly read Gu Xingyin's meaning. There was something in her heart that was ready to move. Yuan Tianyi, this waste, was really an eyesore. She really wanted to get rid of her and never let her appear in front of her again. Just when she was about to lose control and make a move, Gu Xingyin's voice with a smile appeared in her ear. Yuan Qin Jijia, you must remember the Zhen family's rules, as if a basin of cold water was poured over her head. Chapter 14:26. Yuan Qin suppressed the urge to hit her. She looked at Gu Xingyin and sneered, I didn't expect that the fever didn't make you stupid, but instead made you smarter. Gu Xingyin still had a smile on her face. Sister Yuan Qin, you flatter me. Things like cleverness can only be judged by comparison. After she finished speaking, she was satisfied to see that Yuan Qin's ashen face had a tendency to turn purple. Gu Xingyin said to the system, according to this Yuan Qin's narrow-mindedness, how likely is it that she will be angered to death by me? System, host, you've changed, really. You're no longer the pure and unpretentious host that I know. Yuan Qin pinched the solid wood armrest so hard that a crack appeared. She said coldly, Sister, you've become a lot sharper with your words. However, it's useless to only have a sharp mouth. At critical moments, it depends on talent. Am I right, sister? She said this to annoy Gu Xingyin. However, the person opposite her acted as if she didn't hear anything and nodded repeatedly. Sister Yuan Qin is right. Yuan Qin only felt that there was a burst of anger in her heart that couldn't be vented, which made her very uncomfortable. However, the next moment, the other person said, a talented and quiet genius like Brother Yuan Tianqin is a good example for us to learn from. If your talent isn't good enough, you have to spend more time cultivating. There won't be good results if you come out every day. Gotcha. The armrest on Yuan Qin's right, which had a crack, was completely broken. At this moment, Yuan Qin wished that the armrest under her hand was the trash Yuan Tianyi. God knows how much she wanted to pinch her to death. Ah! Gu Xingyin jumped up in surprise and pointed at a piece of scrap solid wood in Yuan Qin's hand. Her shocked expression greatly satisfied Yuan Qin's vanity. She waved the thing in her hand in front of Gu Xingyin as if she was demonstrating her power. The threat in her eyes was very obvious. However, Gu Xingyin just looked at her bitterly and hatefully. Sister Yuan Qin, whether you're successful in your cultivation or in a bad mood, why are you competing with a piece of wood? It's not like you don't know that I'm poor and can't be compared to you. You casually grabbed it and hurt yourself, but you destroyed my armrest. This. She looked very sad, and even her eyes were red. Anyone who walked in and saw Yuan Qin's dark face and the broken armrest in her hand, as well as Gu Xingyin's pale face and red eyes, would only have one thought in their mind: what's wrong with you? This Yuan Qin was looking for trouble. And she's already bullying her. When he came in, he had his own thoughts. He frowned. He didn't have any impression of the third sister's sister. But at the same time, he didn't have a good impression of this Miss Yuan Qin who came from a collateral family. What are you doing? When he spoke, Gu Xingyin noticed that there was a big black dog behind him, almost as tall as an adult's waist. She didn't know what breed the black dog was, but its hair was all black and shiny. Obviously, it was well taken care of. This was the big black dog that Gu Xingyin used to make Yuan Qin angry. Gu Xingyin secretly ridiculed in her heart. No matter how many worlds you cross, the aesthetic of human naming is the same. Chapter 14:27. Yuan Qin's heart skipped a beat when she saw Yuan Tianheng. Although both of them were intermediate summoners, Yuan Tianheng was the young master of the direct line. His father was the younger brother of the head of the family, and his grandfather was an elder of the Yuan family. In terms of status, she was far inferior to this young master in the Yuan family. She was about to say something when she saw Gu Xingyin take a step back. She seemed to be frightened by Yuan Tianheng. Her originally pale face was now drained of blood. Her hands were tightly grabbing her sleeves, and her eyes were drifting. She seemed to be very uneasy. Yuan Qin sneered in her heart. Yuan Tianyi was so unpresentable. Yuan Tianheng didn't even say anything and she was already scared like this. Didn't she know that the Yuan family hated this kind of petty behavior the most? She felt relieved. She felt that Yuan Tianyi, this idiot, had dug her own grave. She proudly glared at Gu Xingyin. When she was about to speak, she met Yuan Tianheng's cold eyes. There was no warmth in his eyes. She couldn't help but tremble. Then she heard Yuan Tianheng's cold voice, bullying the young miss of the direct line of the Yuan family. Do you think there is no one in the direct line of the Yuan family? Yuan Qin looked up in shock. What did this young master just say? He was protecting Yuan Tianyi. When did Yuan Tianyi and Yuan Tianheng have a relationship? She subconsciously refuted, no, I didn't. Yuan Tianheng was too lazy to listen to her. Uncle Shui, tell her to scram. Yes. A gray-clothed figure appeared out of nowhere and grabbed Yuan Qin's collar. Yuan Qin didn't even have time to speak before she was grabbed and disappeared without a trace. Gu Xingyin, who watched from the beginning to the end, she liked this style. The room suddenly quieted down. Yuan Tianheng also looked at Gu Xingyin. Before Gu Xingyin could say anything, she met his disdainful gaze. As a direct line of the Yuan family, you actually live like this. You are really useless. Gu Xingyin, she wanted to take back her words. This person's mouth was really annoying. Yuan Tianheng looked at her again and said, if Blackie didn't like you, I wouldn't care about your business. Dahe? Gu Xingyin couldn't help but look at the big dog that was almost as tall as her. What did this have to do with Dahe? When the big dog saw Gu Xingyin looking at it, it thought that she wanted to play with it. It was obviously very happy. And so, Gu Xingyin was beautifully pounced on by a big black dog that was even bigger than her. Dahe sniffed and licked her body. Obviously, it really liked her. Gu Xingyin tried to hold it in, but in the end, he couldn't hold it in anymore. He slapped Big Blackie on the head. Stop it. Dahe looked at her with wet eyes. It was obviously very aggrieved, but it was very obedient and did not make trouble for her again. However, Gu Xingyin felt another burning gaze. She raised her head and met Yuan Tianheng's sparkling eyes. Yuan Tianheng was still expressionless, but Gu Xingyin seemed to hear a trace of excitement in his voice. How did you do it? Gu Xingyin didn't understand what he meant for a moment until she saw his eyes looking at her hand that was still on Dahe's head. This guy, wasn't Dahe his pet? Why was he looking at her with envy? She hesitated for a moment and said something that was very annoying. Probably. I was born with it. Chapter 14:28. Thus, on the first day Gu Xingyin came to this world, she successfully gained Yuan Qin's hatred and gained a friend. This friend was given to her by Yuan Tianheng himself. He probably really loved his dog, Big Black, so the person that Big Black liked was his friend. Gu Xingyin, who had been befriended, but when she thought about it carefully, as Yuan Tianyi living in the Yuan clan, becoming friends with Yuan Tianheng was not a bad thing. Gu Xingyin didn't know if it was because of the head steward's conscience or because of Yuan Tianheng, but she found that her life had become a lot better. Every day, there would be 3 sumptuous meals and exquisite food boxes delivered to her courtyard. Gu Xingyin requested it herself. She didn't like other people trespassing on her territory. On the second day after she came to this world, after asking for her permission, a large group of people dressed as craftsmen entered her courtyard. They only spent an afternoon to completely renovate her courtyard. Looking at the newly renovated courtyard, Gu Xingyin sighed with emotion. Finally, it looks like a living person. After everyone left, Gu Xingyin returned to her room. Her expression turned cold. It was obvious that these craftsmen were not the work of the head steward. He didn't need to rush to curry favor with a young lady who couldn't see a future. Then, it could only be Yuan Tianheng. It seemed that she had underestimated the status of a direct descendant of the Yuan clan. It was no wonder that Yuan Tianheng said those words when he first saw her. It was obvious that she, who was bullied by a branch family descendant, was really useless in his eyes. She thought of the gray-clothed figure beside Yuan Tianheng who threw Yuan Qin away. This was also one of the differences between a direct descendant and a branch family descendant. After the direct descendant of the Yuan clan had a talent test at the age of 5, the clan would assign a protector who was at least at the martial king realm to each of the promising direct descendants. These protectors were all nurtured by the Yuan clan and would directly establish a contract with their new master. From then on, they only needed to be loyal to their own little master. Even if the master and the head of the Yuan clan didn't agree, the protector only needed to follow the master's opinion. From the day he became the protector of the little master, he was no longer a member of the Yuan clan. He was only a trusted subordinate of the direct descendant. A martial king realm expert. The Yuan clan was really generous. Gu Xingyin sighed with emotion. In this world, the highest position. Summoners had the status. But aside from summoners and ordinary people, there was another profession, martial warriors. The status of a warrior was not comparable to that of a summoner, but high-level warriors were still respectable existences. Martial warriors were divided warriors, martial masters, martial kings, martial emperors, and revered martial artists. The main reason why the status of a warrior was not higher than that of a summoner was that it was very difficult for a warrior to advance. A martial king realm warrior was already an extremely powerful warrior on the magical beast continent. However, a martial king expert, in terms of combat power, might only be equivalent to a 6th-grade magical beast. As for martial emperors, they were already extremely powerful martial warriors in this continent. Even a high-level summoner would not dare to offend such a strong person. After all, in terms of individual combat ability, a high-level summoner might not necessarily be able to defeat a martial emperor warrior. Because a martial emperor might not have the chance to attack a high-level summoner. Chapter 1429. However, although there are many high-level summoners in the magical beast continent, there are only a few martial kings. This is also the reason why summoners are able to seize the dominant position in this continent. Back to the topic. Although the Zhen family is so generous, it's only for the direct descendants that they think have the potential to cultivate. For someone like Yuan Tianyi who doesn't have a future, the family naturally won't spend too much on her. What surprised Gu Xingyin was that it was impossible for the rest of the family to not know about such a big change on his side. But several days have passed, and no one has said anything. Although she knows this is normal, but there are no retards coming to fight, Gu Xingyin's heart actually feels a little uncomfortable. System. Host, you may need to take medicine. Gu Xingyin is still sighing. The Zhen family is worthy of being able to stand on this continent for thousands of years without falling. Look at this direct descendant. In Yuan Tianyi's memory, except for Yuan Qin, that miss from the collateral branch who would think of ways to make things difficult for her, she has never encountered any difficulties. Thinking about it, in these big families, whether it's the collateral branch or the direct descendant, the competition is very fierce. Who has the time to waste on cultivation and study to make things difficult for Yuan Tianyi, a waste destined to not be a threat to them? They say they are very busy and have no time. They, to put it nicely, don't hit people when they are down, but to put it bluntly, they are indifferent. Complete and utter indifference. Because Yuan Tianyi has no value, it's not worth their trouble at all. Although they won't hit people when they are down, but when Yuan Qin makes things difficult for Yuan Tianyi, no one reaches out a hand to help. They don't care whether Yuan Tianyi is dead or alive. But for Gu Xingyin, this kind of indifference is enough. She doesn't need those people's care. Moreover, this kind of straightforward indifference was much better than those hypocritical care. Even Yuan Qin's simple and crude way of looking for trouble makes Gu Xingyin feel a little cute, stupid to the point of being cute. Of course, no matter what, Yuan Qin killed the real Yuan Tianyi, this is a fact. Gu Xingyin will not be soft-hearted to repay her. Night fell. Gu Xingyin sat alone in the small courtyard. She sat on the stone bench and tried to draw a complicated pattern on the stone table with her fingers. The mysterious lines moved along her fingers, and Gu Xingyin slowly traced the pattern in her mind. Because she was abandoned by her family as a waste, Yuan Tianyi had never learned anything related to cultivation or summoning. At this time, she was relying on the system to teach herself. The so-called self-study was actually just trying to copy the summoning array according to the ancient summoning blueprints. After all, the professional knowledge had already been directly transmitted into her mind by the system. Now, she only needed to practice it. The system was still talking. According to ancient records, there were some exceptionally talented ancient summoners who could summon magical beasts that were bound to their souls before the age of 14. The system stopped halfway through its sentence. Gu Xingyin was also stunned. She was just casually drawing a picture of the summoning array. What was going on? Chapter 1430. On the smooth stone table, a thin layer of light suddenly appeared on the originally empty surface of the table. After those lights lit up, they connected together to form an extremely complex and mysterious pattern. Gu Xingyin, system, Gu Xingyin calmly said, system, it's time for you to shine. The system calmly activated its cheat and used a powerful barrier to surround the entire courtyard. Looking at the appearance of the formation, it was obvious that the host's summoning formation was working. While the person and the system were both very confused, they were also secretly anticipating what would be summoned. However, the mysterious formation was still glowing, but there were no signs of anything appearing. Gu Xingyin looked at it for a while and felt that nothing would appear for the time being, so she prepared to chat with the system. Gu Xingyin said, system, Yuan Tianyi's body is only 10 years old. Meaning that she wasn't 14 years old yet. The system indicated that it knew. Gu Xingyin then said, system, Yuan Tianyi doesn't seem to have awakened her ancient summoner bloodline. The system seriously said that it knew. Gu Xingyin continued, that was the first time I drew a summoning formation, so I just randomly drew it. The system thought that if it was in human form right now, it would definitely have a cigarette in its mouth and a face full of vicissitudes. Finally, Gu Xingyin asked, I said so much because I want to know how I was able to draw a summoning formation successfully. A summoning formation wasn't an easy formation to draw. Precisely because of the idea behind it, it was extremely difficult to draw. Its difficulty didn't lie in the pattern, but in the conditions required to draw a summoning formation. The power of the soul, the understanding of the summoning technique, the sincerity of the heart without any impurities, all of these conditions needed to be met. However, Gu Xingyin looked at the formation she drew while chatting with the system and fell silent. The system also used silence to answer her. To be honest, it also didn't know how the host was able to draw a summoning formation so smoothly. This didn't make sense. Just as the man and the system fell silent, there was finally a change in the summoning circle. The kind-hearted rune slowly dimmed, but at the final moment, all the light spots gathered in one place and fell to the ground. It was as if a figure was condensed from the light. A tall and slender figure gradually took shape from the light. Gu Xingyin stared with wide eyes until the figure completely appeared in front of him. This person had a head full of crow feather-like long hair that fell straight to the ground. He was wearing a fiery red long robe that tightly wrapped around his slender body. His eyes. Even Gu Xingyin, who was used to seeing countless beauties, couldn't help but reveal a look of amazement when she saw him. It was a beauty that could not be described by human imagination. When such a gorgeous and exquisite face appeared on a man's face, it did not seem out of place at all. The most eye-catching thing was the delicate red lotus mark between the man's eyebrows. It was as red as blood and complemented the red robe on his body. It was extremely beautiful. Such a person, no matter where he appeared, would definitely steal everyone's attention as long as he appeared. However, such a gorgeous beauty did not seem frivolous or flirtatious at all when you looked at him. Chapter 1431. Gu Xingyin blinked, then blinked again. Actually, she didn't quite understand the situation. Wasn't it a summoning array? Wouldn't it summon a magical beast? What was going on when she summoned a person? However, before she could figure it out, she felt her body become light. Her body had already left the ground and landed in someone's embrace. At the same time, the elegant fragrance of lotus flowers enveloped her from all directions. Gu Xingyin was dumbfounded. Did she accidentally summon her lover? Human, were you the one who summoned me? A clear and cold voice rang in her ears. Gu Xingyin was stunned for a moment, then realized that the other party was talking to her. She wasn't afraid, and directly turned her body so that she was facing the man. I was just trying out the array described in the book. I didn't expect. Her voice unconsciously became a little softer under the man's oppressive gaze. Trying out? The man sized up Gu Xingyin without leaving a trace. Almost in an instant, he clearly saw her age and cultivation level. He glanced at the courtyard again, and when he felt the remaining power on the stone table, his eyebrows trembled. He was actually summoned so casually. I don't see anything extraordinary about you. At most, you have the bloodline of an ancient summoner. How did you summon me? The man frowned, obviously puzzled. Even 1,000 years ago, when the human summoners were at their strongest, there was no summoner who had the ability to summon him. How did this ordinary little human girl do it? Before he could figure it out, he felt a cool little hand gently brushing against his eyebrows. Gu Xingyin also knew that her actions were too abrupt, but when she saw his frown, she couldn't help but want to smooth it out. He had to be happy. Although he looked good like this, it didn't suit her. The man was obviously stunned. He had lived for more than 10,000 years, and no one had ever dared to treat him like this. Of course, no one had ever had the chance to treat him like this. If others dared to treat him with such an offensive attitude, perhaps that person's hand would be gone by now. But this human girl in front of him, how could he describe this feeling? When her hand fell between his eyebrows, it was as if a feather gently brushed across his heart, or as if a warm light fell into the bottom of his heart. He didn't hate this feeling, and even, he liked it. The man who had always followed his heart hugged her a little tighter, and even took the initiative to rub his face against Gu Xingyin's hand. Gu Xingyin originally wanted to take her hand back, but seeing him like this, her heart almost melted. She had never thought that an adult man would be so adorable when he did such an action. She continued to caress his face reluctantly. Gu Xingyin let out a dry cough and reluctantly withdrew his hand. He asked, "Who are you? What's your name?" The slightly cold touch on his face disappeared, and the man was a little unhappy. But seeing Gu Xingyin sitting in his arms, her bright black eyes staring at him without blinking, her pupils filled with his own reflection, his mood improved again. "My name is Lin Yuan, the ruler of the 9 Hells Purgatory." The ruler of the 9 Hells Purgatory. Gu Xingyin's eyes widened when she heard this name. Chapter 1432. Because this name had appeared in the original plot. That was after Yuan Tianyi reached the later stage, with countless magical beast underlings under her command, and became an influential figure in the entire magical beast continent. At that time, Yuan Tianyi's strength was extremely powerful in the entire magical beast continent, but she suffered a severe loss in a place, and even had no way to get it back. That place was the 9 Hells Purgatory. And the person who made Yuan Tianyi suffer a loss was the ruler of the 9 Hells Purgatory, Lin Yuan, whose body was a hellfire red lotus. Why did Yuan Tianyi suffer a loss? Because those magical beast underlings under her command, no matter if it was a high-level magical beast or her natal magical beast, the Moonlight Unicorn, when they saw Lin Yuan, they were all trembling in fear and couldn't summon up the will to fight at all. Lin Yuan said that he was the ruler of the 9 Hells Purgatory, but in fact, he was the ruler of all magical beasts. She actually. Just like that, she casually summoned the ultimate boss of the magical beast world? Moreover, this ultimate boss was her lover? Gu Xingyin expressed that this cheat was a bit too big. But she liked it. Seeing a smile suddenly appear on her face, Lin Yuan's mood unconsciously became very good. He asked, why are you smiling? Gu Xingyin looked at him. Because you are very powerful, I am your summoner. His summoner. The summoner that belonged to him. Lin Yuan's mood became better because of this sentence. As for Gu Xingyin's previous words, he had already ignored them. Lin Yuan stood up and suddenly glanced at the sky of this small courtyard. He frowned and looked deeply at Gu Xingyin in his arms. I couldn't tell that there was an expert by your side. Gu Xingyin looked at him with an innocent look of, what are you talking about? I don't understand. Lin Yuan also didn't speak. He held Gu Xingyin in one hand and waved his other hand in the air. The system said to Gu Xingyin, the barrier I set up was broken by him. Gu Xingyin thought for a moment and asked, according to the power levels of this world, what kind of strength would be needed to break your barrier? The system was silent for a moment before it said, I think you're not the only one who has cheated. Gu Xingyin did not understand what was going on, but the system continued, this barrier of mine, just in case, was set up according to the original plot of this world's top combat power, but, in the end, Gu Xingyin saw it. Lin Yuan casually broke it as if he was waving away a mosquito. Thus, she also fell into silence. What could she say? Gu Xingyin said, I don't know anything. Fortunately, Lin Yuan didn't ask any more questions. He glanced at the sky and said to himself, you humans should be resting at this time, right? Without waiting for Gu Xingyin's reaction, he directly carried her into the house and walked into Gu Xingyin's room with familiarity. Gu Xingyin. Wait, big brother, this is your first time. Come on, why do you look more skilled than me? Probably because the surprise in her eyes was too obvious, Lin Yuan directly said, I just used my divine sense to scan it, so the structure of this courtyard is all in my mind. Gu Xingyin didn't say anything. She obediently let Lin Yuan carry her in and take off her shoes for her. Yes, he personally took off her shoes for her. If this scene was seen by the magical beasts of the 9th netherworld, their eyeballs would probably fall out. Was this still the big boss they knew? Chapter 1433. Knowing that he was her lover, he probably wouldn't do anything that would surprise Gu Xingyin too much. Gu Xingyin watched him take off his coat, and then, she directly hugged herself and lay down. Gu Xingyin looked up at him and pointed to herself, is it really okay for us to do this? Lin Yuan raised his eyebrows and looked at her, as if there was something wrong with her. Fine. Gu Xingyin expressed that she admitted defeat. She obediently closed her eyes and shrank into his arms. Gu Xingyin thought that she would be a little uncomfortable and even unable to sleep, but he obviously underestimated her. Lying in the familiar embrace, it didn't take long for her to feel sleepy and fall into a deep sleep. Sensing that the breathing of the person in his arms had become long, Lin Yuan turned his head and looked at her seriously. He used his eyes to copy all the corners of her eyes and eyebrows over and over again, until this shadow was firmly engraved in his heart, and then he closed his eyes in satisfaction. There was a smile on his face that even he himself didn't notice. When Gu Xingyin woke up the next day, she found that the other party was still here. She felt a little strange. Isn't it strange that I'm still here? Lin Yuan didn't even look at her, and asked. Gu Xingyin nodded. Because if the summoner and his own magical beast didn't sign a life contract and let it become his own magical beast, that magical beast would return to the space where he originally lived. Last night, Gu Xingyin didn't sign a contract with Lin Yuan. Logically speaking, Lin Yuan should have left by this time. Lin Yuan sneered, how can those trash compare with me? Unknowingly, Lin Yuan himself didn't realize that when facing Gu Xingyin, his self-title had changed from I to I Gu Xingyin. Well, that's true. After all, the person in front of her, even the system admitted that he had cheated. Seeing Gu Xingyin lowering her head obediently, Lin Yuan suddenly said, little girl Tianyi, will you sign a contract with me? Gu Xingyin raised his head and stared at him in surprise. She was not surprised that Lin Yuan would know her understanding. What really surprised her was that he actually took the initiative to ask to sign a contract with her. One had to know that for a powerhouse at Lin Yuan's level, signing a contract with a summoner would not give him any benefits. In the original plot, Yuan Tianyi also tried to subdue this king of magical beasts, but in the end, she just left. And now, Lin Yuan actually took the initiative to request to sign a contract with him? Gu Xingyin thought about it and said, Lin Yuan, signing a contract with me won't do you any good. Aren't you doing well now? Anyway, you can always stay by my side. That's different. Lin Yuan suddenly said. The summoning contract can connect our souls together. Lin Yuan said in a low voice. This was the most intimate relationship in the world. There was one more thing he didn't say. Gu Xingyin was a summoner, and one day she would find a magical beast to form a contract with. He simply couldn't bear the fact that the person in front of him had such a close relationship with other magical beasts. So, it was better to change it to himself. Gu Xingyin was originally unwilling, but Lin Yuan had always insisted. Finally, under the man's almost coercive gaze, Gu Xingyin bit her middle finger and put her finger between his eyebrows. Chapter 1434. Something mysterious came into her mind from Gu Xingyin's middle finger that was stuck between Lin Yuan's eyebrows. When she put down her finger, she began to feel that there seemed to be a strange connection between herself and Lin Yuan. She couldn't tell what kind of feeling this connection was, but if the other party had any strong emotional fluctuations, she seemed to be able to detect it. It was very strange, but she didn't hate it. She couldn't help but laugh. Then, she heard a very unpleasant voice coming from outside the courtyard. Yuan Tianyi, come out. Gu Xingyin looked out of the window. It was still very early at this time. Perhaps the breakfast in the Yuan residence hadn't been ready yet. Why did Yuan Qin come to her at this time? Gu Xingyin didn't intend to pay attention to her. This woman was also stupid. Didn't she know that at this time, everyone preferred silence? Sure enough, without waiting for Gu Xingyin to speak, Yuan Qin heard the angry barking of a dog from the courtyard next door. Then, Yuan Tianheng, who made her afraid at a glance, came out with his big black dog. Yuan Qin, shouting so early in the morning, where is your upbringing? Yuan Tianheng also had a poisonous mouth. He also knew what kind of words could hit the nail on the head. Sure enough, his one sentence made Yuan Qin's face turn pale. Yuan Tianheng didn't pay attention to her anymore. Instead, he turned and left his courtyard. He didn't intervene in the matter between Yuan Qin and Yuan Tianyi. He just taught Yuan Qin a lesson because she disturbed him. Although he felt that he and Yuan Tianyi were already friends, there were some things that he shouldn't do. Otherwise, Yuan Tianyi wouldn't really stand up in this life. Yuan Qin saw that there was still no response from Gu Xingyin's small courtyard. She was angry and directly pushed open the courtyard door. Lin Yuan frowned. Before Gu Xingyin could stop it, Yuan Qin's whole body flew out. Gu Xingyin looked at Lin Yuan and frowned. This kind of person is not worth your time. I'll do it. Lin Yuan looked down at her. Few people dared to speak to him in such a reproachful tone. But, he nodded. I will pay attention next time. Since she was the one who said it, he would listen to her. Outside the courtyard, Yuan Qin bent over and spat out a mouthful of blood. She looked at Gu Xingyin's courtyard in shock, as if she was looking at something extremely terrifying. At that moment, she even felt the aura of death. When did Yuan Tianyi's courtyard have such a powerful master? Could it be that the clan had also arranged for a protector for her? No, that was impossible. The family would never waste resources on a piece of trash. Moreover, if she had a protector, how could she have let him bully her like this in the past? Gu Xingyin's figure appeared in front of her. Yuan Qin struggled to get up from the ground and looked at Gu Xingyin with fear. Yuan Tianyi, what did you do? Who's in your courtyard? Gu Xingyin ignored her. He looked at her and said indifferently, you don't have to care who he is. I just want to tell you that he has a bad temper. If there's a next time, it won't be as simple as vomiting blood. After that, she ignored Yuan Qin's green and white face and turned away. Yuan Qin looked at Gu Xingyin with resentment. Such an arrogant look made her hate that she couldn't cough. A dull pain came from her chest. Yuan Qin withdrew her gaze and wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth with her sleeve. The corner of her mouth hooked up into a cold smile. Yuan Tianyi, so what if you have a backer? Can it be bigger than the Yuan family? I just want to know, a direct descendant who blatantly violated the Yuan family's rules, and a piece of trash who can't become a summoner, how will the family deal with it? Chapter 1435. Yuan Qin left Gu Xingyin's courtyard with a pale face. Looking at her appearance, Gu Xingyin knew that this woman was not reconciled. However, with Yuan Qin's IQ and ability, there were only a few things she could do for revenge. Coincidentally, no matter which one it was, Gu Xingyin would not feel afraid. With Yuan Qin's strength, even she would be able to subdue others, not to mention that Gu Xingyin now had the #1 golden thigh of the continent of magical beasts by his side. She was in a good mood and was ready to wait for the servants of the Yuan mansion to bring breakfast. After that, she would discuss the future with Lin Yuan. But she couldn't eat breakfast. Because when she walked into the room, a burst of unexpected pain directly exploded from Gu Xingyin's body. As if the blood all over her body was boiling, Gu Xingyin even had an illusion that she would burn out in this extreme heat and pain. She fell to the ground uncontrollably, but she didn't touch the cold ground. Instead, she fell into a cool embrace. Lin Yuan held her firmly in his arms. He could feel her pain at the moment. After concluding the contract, both sides could perceive to a certain extent what the other side was suffering. Lin Yuan's face darkened when he felt the scorching pain. He could only feel a trace of Gu Xingyin's feelings at this time, and it was already so serious. It could be imagined how much pain the other party was facing at the moment. Lin Yuan frowned. When he had just probed, he had already discovered that it was not that something had happened to Gu Xingyin, but that the ancient summoner bloodline in her body had awakened. The bloodline that should have been awakened at the age of 14 was triggered in advance because she had successfully signed a contract with herself. Lin Yuan looked at Gu Xingyin's pale face because of the pain, and the hair on her temples had been soaked with cold sweat. He thought for a moment, reached out his hand, and a white jade bed appeared in the small courtyard. It was unknown what material the white jade bed was made of, but it still exuded a dense chill under the sun. Lin Yuan gently placed her on the bed. Perhaps it was because of the bed, but Lin Yuan could clearly see that the other party's expression had eased up a little. His expression softened as he sat beside the bed. He took out a snow-white handkerchief and gently wiped the sweat off Gu Xingyin's face. If it were for any other reason, he might be able to help. However, there was nothing he could do about the bloodline awakening. He could only let her endure it herself. Gu Xingyin felt as if she had fallen into a huge furnace. She was surrounded by crimson flames, which burned her skin, flesh, and even her soul mercilessly. His consciousness was dizzy and he was about to fall into chaos amidst the pain. No. There seemed to be an obsession in the depths of her mind that kept her awake. She absolutely could not fall under this pain. Lin Yuan saw her frown again and couldn't help but reach out to hold her hand, but his heart suddenly moved. His gaze instantly turned cold as he looked at the courtyard gate. Yuan Qin was respectfully following behind an old man. The old man was wearing a black and white robe. He was serious and looked very unapproachable. Behind him, there were several young disciples who were similarly dressed. This was the Yuan family, the people of the law enforcement hall. Chapter 1436. As soon as the old man, who was also the Yuan family's law enforcement elder, entered the door, he saw Lin Yuan sitting in the courtyard and coldly looking at him. The aura coming from the person opposite him was too strong, making the law enforcement elder's heart tremble. His face was still so stern, but his tone was very polite. "May I know who you are? Why did you suddenly appear in my Yuan family? Why did you injure my Yuan family disciple?" When he said this, his eyes happened to see the white jade couch next to Lin Yuan, and the unconscious Gu Xingyin on the couch. Of course he recognized the third miss of the direct line, this white jade couch. His eyes suddenly shrank. If he didn't see wrong, this was a jade couch carved out of a whole piece of 10,000-year-old cold jade. How precious was 10,000-year-old cold jade? Even a small piece was hard to find, let alone a whole piece like this. Even the powerful Yuan family didn't have such a large cold jade couch. Who was this man? What was his relationship with the third miss? The law enforcement elder was thinking in his heart, but Lin Yuan looked at Yuan Qin behind him. Obviously, the injured Yuan family disciple was referring to her. The reason why the people from the Yuan clan's law enforcement hall were here was obvious. Lin Yuan sneered. He said indifferently, I am Yuan Tianyi's contracted magical beast. Your family's disciple really didn't pay attention to etiquette. If there's a next time, it won't be as simple as injuring. How arrogant. Ever since the law enforcement elder took charge of the law enforcement hall, no one dared to speak to him in such a tone for a long time. If it was a normal day, he would certainly teach that person what it meant to be careful with words and actions. But at this moment, his mind was not on this at all. He just looked at Lin Yuan in horror and said, What did you say? Not to mention that the third miss was only 10 years old, far from the age of awakening as a summoner. Didn't she test out a low-level talent and have no possibility of becoming a summoner? What did this man mean? Lin Yuan frowned. Did this person not understand human language? He was in a bad mood, so the pressure on his body was naturally stronger. The law enforcement elder's body suddenly flashed with white light, and a huge cloud-soaring eagle appeared beside him. It was actually an automatic warning from the contract. It was directly forced out by the opponent's aura. This cloud-soaring eagle was the law enforcement elder's contracted magical beast. It was at level 8 and was considered one of the top magical beasts. This time, it had sensed that the contractor was in danger, so it immediately activated the contract and rushed to his side. However, as soon as it appeared, the cloud-soaring eagle did not even have the time to observe its surroundings before it was suppressed by a terrifying yet familiar aura. It carefully looked in the direction of the abyss. With just a glance, the majestic cloud-soaring eagle's feathers all puffed up. Oh my God! Why did this person come out? At this moment, the cloud-soaring eagle wished that it could shrink its body to the point where it could not be seen and hide in some crevice. The cloud-soaring condor's emotions were directly transmitted to Patriarch of Law Enforcement's mind. His heart sank. What kind of existence could cause the 8th-grade cloud-soaring eagle to be so afraid of? But before he could speak, Yuan Qin jumped out from behind him. As soon as Yuan Qin entered the courtyard, she was stunned by Lin Yuan's appearance and bearing. She stared at him for a long time until the other party's cold words made her come back to her senses. Chapter 1437. The other side's words were understated, but no one would doubt the authenticity of it. This red-clothed man was clearly protecting Yuan Tianyi, that waste. Yuan Qin couldn't help but feel jealous once again. She simply didn't understand. Yuan Tianyi, that waste who couldn't become a summoner, was raised by the family with good food and drink, but why? Yuan Tianhen would speak for her, and now, even such a strange man was standing up for her. Saying that it was her contractual magical beast? Lying without thinking, who didn't know that Yuan Tianyi was a waste with low talent? She knew that the man in front of her was very powerful, and she could guess it from the polite tone of the law enforcement elder. But Yuan Qin was not afraid. So what if he was powerful? Could he be more powerful than the whole Yuan family? This was also the reason why she dared to stand up at this moment. The Yuan family couldn't watch their own disciple have an accident on the Yuan family's territory. So Yuan Qin said in a sharp tone, Your Excellency, before you speak, you should inquire about it first. My third sister is a well-known inferior talent. It is impossible to summon a magical beast. What's more, she is only 10 years old this year. If you want to protect her, you should find a better reason, right? Lin Yuan glanced at her and couldn't help but move his fingers. According to his temper, such an insensible and weak human being, it was best to directly eliminate her. But he remembered what Gu Xingyin said to her before. It seemed that she preferred to do it herself. He thought about it and resisted the urge to do it. Lin Yuan's gaze returned to Gu Xingyin's pale face, and said without looking back, You are a waste yourself. Do you think everyone else is a waste like you? You. Yuan Qin was angry, but couldn't find any strong words to refute for a while. The law enforcement elder's face was not very good. After all, the other side's words, after careful consideration, seemed to scold all of them. He suppressed the anger in his heart and said in a low voice, "Your Excellency, I came here this time very seriously to." Lin Yuan felt that these people were really noisy. He looked at Gu Xingyin's pale face on the cold jade couch and felt that the voice in his ear was really annoying. Noisy. He impatiently waved his sleeves and directly kicked them out. The courtyard door directly closed in front of them with a loud bang. "Elder?" A disciple's nervous voice called out to Elder of Law Enforcement. Elder of Law Enforcement regained his composure and concealed the horror that rose from his heart. What kind of person was that man in red to be able to pull off such a trick? The Patriarch of Law Enforcement said calmly, "I'll ask the family head. This person is not someone we can touch. There's no need for that." An old voice came from behind him. When Elder of Law Enforcement saw clearly who the person in front of him was, he was so scared that his knees went soft and he knelt down. "Ancestor." All the Yuan family disciples around him followed suit and knelt down. Yuan Qin was no exception. She was a little curious. The old ancestor of the Yuan family was a legendary figure. It was said that he had broken through the level of a level 9 summoner several hundred years ago and entered the higher level of the mysterious realm. Normally, this old ancestor would be in seclusion and would not see outsiders. Today, he actually came out. She carefully raised her head, wanting to look at the ancestor, but she just happened to meet his penetrating gaze. Chapter 1438. Yuan Qin only felt that the Yuan family patriarch's gaze seemed to penetrate everything and directly landed on the bottom of her heart. The resentment, and filthy thoughts that were deeply hidden in her heart were all exposed under such a gaze. She couldn't help but lower her head to avoid this gaze. The Yuan family patriarch actually only glanced at her. Seeing Yuan Qin's reaction, the Yuan family patriarch didn't mind. With his status, it wasn't worthwhile to argue with a junior of the family. At this moment, Elder Jifa, who was kneeling at the front, carefully raised his head and said to the Yuan family patriarch, "Patriarch, what are you doing?" The Yuan family patriarch raised his head and looked at Gu Xingyin's small courtyard. The corner of his mouth revealed a secret smile. "How can an old man like me not personally receive an important guest of the family?" Important guest? The enforcement elder thought of the man in the third Mrs. courtyard. With such power and influence, even the patriarch had appeared. Who exactly was he? The law enforcement elder thought about his previous words with cold sweat. He was sure that he had not been disrespectful to the distinguished guest. Then, he felt a little relieved. But Yuan Qin was different. In her heart, the Yuan family was a colossus that even the imperial family of the Dragon Phoenix Empire had to treat with respect. She thought that no matter how powerful that man was, he couldn't be more powerful than the Yuan family. But what was the situation now? The patriarch, who couldn't even be invited to the emperor's birthday, actually came out of seclusion for this red-clothed man. And he even called him an important guest? Yuan Qin thought of the words she said to vent her anger. She immediately lost all her strength and almost collapsed in front of the patriarch. No, that kind of big shot always had their eyes on the top of their heads and didn't care about the lower world. They wouldn't lower themselves to her level. She comforted herself. The Yuan family patriarch glanced at them. Obviously, he knew that these juniors were very nervous because he was here. "All of you, leave. Don't disturb us here." The law enforcement elder hurriedly complied. Then, he left with his disciples and his cloud-soaring eagle, which had been scared out of its wits. Yuan Qin was full of doubts. Although she really wanted to know what happened, she didn't dare to say anything because of the patriarch's power. After everyone had left, only then did the Yuan family ancestor put away the trace of kindness on his face. With a solemn expression, he said to the small courtyard, "Esteemed guests have arrived. Is it possible for this old man, the host, to pay a visit?" He was in seclusion when he suddenly sensed a powerful force in his own residence. Although this power disappeared in the blink of an eye, he didn't dare to let his guard down in the slightest. With such a strong power, this person could even threaten him. Who was the Yuan family's old ancestor? He knew in his heart that there were only a few people on this continent who could reach this level. Regardless of who it was, the Yuan family didn't want to make an enemy out of them. Therefore, when he opened his mouth, he lowered his stance slightly. The door of the small courtyard opened with a loud bang. Lin Yuan treated the strong with enough respect, especially the courteous strong, although this strong person was not really in his eyes. When the Yuan family patriarch entered the small courtyard and saw the figure sitting on a simple stone bench, he began to rejoice in his heart that he had been polite enough. Chapter 1439. With his temperament, he naturally wouldn't show anything on his face, but only he knew how shocked and puzzled he was in his heart. The Yuan family's old ancestor walked in and saw Lin Yuan sitting beside a little girl in the courtyard. It looked like he was protecting her. He sensed this little girl and found that she actually had his Yuan family's bloodline. Thinking about it, he was delighted. From the looks of it, this person's relationship with his family's junior wasn't shallow. If the Yuan family could obtain this person's help, thinking of that possibility, the Yuan family's old ancestor revealed a trace of a smile. He cupped his hands towards Lin Yuan. I wonder why Lin Yuan Jun has come to my Yuan residence. With Lin Yuan's strength and status, it was enough for him to address him as Lin Yuan Jun. Lin Yuan raised his head and looked at him, only saying one sentence. I am this girl's contracted magical beast. The Yuan family's old ancestor raised his head in shock, only feeling that his brain that had lived for thousands of years couldn't understand this sentence. The famous Lin Yuan Jun, who was a legend in the hearts of all summoners, actually became someone else's contracted magical beast. All summoners knew that if a summoner wanted to form a contract with a magical beast, it had to be under the premise that both parties were willing. Everyone knew how arrogant this person was. How could he be willing to form a contract with a human girl? But the Yuan family's old ancestor didn't doubt Lin Yuan's words at all. With this person's status and personality, it was impossible for him to lie about this matter. The Yuan family's old ancestor couldn't help but curiously look at Gu Xingyin. He was really curious. What kind of summoner could actually make Lin Yuan Jun willingly form a contract with her? When he saw it, his expression became strange. Not to mention that she was only 10 years old, although the continent of magical beasts publicly recognized that summoning contracts started at 14 years old. As a saint-level summoner, the Yuan family's old ancestor naturally knew that as long as one had enough talent and soul power, they didn't have to wait until they were 14 years old. But, no matter how he looked at it, this junior with his family's bloodline seemed to be a trash with no talent for summoning. If it was any other time, when he saw this kind of seedling, he definitely wouldn't have the mood to take a second look. But just thinking about how she was Lin Yuan Jun's contracted summoner, the Yuan family's old ancestor felt that he couldn't wait to study this girl properly. Even an old fellow like him who had lived for thousands of years couldn't help but be jealous of the Abyssal Lord Summoner. That was the Lord of the Abyss who could make all magical beasts lower their heads and call him Lord. The Yuan family patriarch was, after all, an expert who had stepped into the ultimate saint realm. After taking a closer look, he could tell that something was amiss. There seemed to be some kind of mysterious power sealed within the body of his junior, and at this moment, that power was showing signs of slowly awakening. This is... The Yuan family patriarch furrowed his brows and sensed for a while. Suddenly, he was overjoyed. This was the ancient summoner bloodline. From this, one could see the difference between the Yuan family's patriarch and Lin Yuan. At that time, Lin Yuan only took a glance and almost saw through Gu Xingyin's background. As for the Yuan family patriarch, he didn't notice anything at first glance. It wasn't until later that he realized that Gu Xingyin possessed the ancient summoner bloodline. The Yuan family patriarch was both surprised and overjoyed, an ancient summoner. That was a powerful existence in the legends who could command countless magical beasts with their own strength. His Yuan family actually had a descendant who possessed the ancient summoner bloodline. Moreover, looking at the current situation, this bloodline was in the midst of awakening. Chapter 1440. No wonder this junior of his was able to summon a peerless expert like the Abyssal Lord. The smile on his face couldn't be any more beautiful. The Abyssal Lord was in a bad mood. Couldn't this old man restrain the way he was looking at his little girl? What business do you have here? He coldly reminded the old man. What did he come here for? The old man finally remembered that he had come here to take a look because he had sensed a shocking aura coming from the estate. But now that he knew the Abyssal Lord's identity and reason for coming here, his heart had long since calmed down. Moreover, he was even happier than when he had broken through. The Abyssal Lord had become the contracted beast of a Yuan descendant. There was simply no better news than this. However, he glanced at the Abyssal Lord. It was clear that the other party didn't welcome his arrival. He glanced at his own junior, who was still unconscious, and had a rough idea of what the Abyssal Lord was feeling. The contracted beast was connected to the summoner's soul. The Abyssal Lord was probably extremely worried about the summoner's safety. At this time, he naturally wouldn't be nice to outsiders who came to disturb him. However, the old man didn't feel that he was being slighted at all. This was good. The more the Abyssal Lord cared about his summoner, the happier the old man would be. As long as the summoner was still a member of the Yuan family, then the Abyssal Lord and the Yuan family would naturally be on the same side. But the old man had taken things for granted. He had never thought about what would happen if the Abyssal Lord's summoner didn't treat him as a member of the Yuan family. The old man already knew everything he needed to know. After returning, he specially called the head of the Yuan family over and instructed him to treat the third miss of the estate, Yuan Tianyi, well. The Yuan family head who was called out was dumbfounded. He was in charge of such a large family. Among the younger generation, who would have the time to care about an invisible person, unless the person was his direct descendant or an extremely talented junior in the family? He didn't even know who this third miss was. But since the old man had spoken, he had to know even if he didn't know. He had to take good care of her. The head of the Yuan family even felt an inexplicable sense of envy towards the third miss. He didn't know what kind of luck this third miss, Yuan Tianyi, had to have received the old man's recognition. This was a huge benefit. He hurriedly ordered his trusted aide to pass on his message. The third miss of the mansion will receive the same treatment as the eldest young master of the family, Yuan Tianqin. When this order was given, it immediately caused an uproar in the Yuan residence. Who was Yuan Tianqin? At the beginning of this year, at the age of 14, he had successfully summoned a magical beast of the 9th rank, the violet-winged thunder dragon. Although the purple-winged dragon wouldn't be by Yuan Tianqin's side now, Yuan Tianqin was still only a 5th-level summoner. Before he became a true powerhouse, the purple-winged thunder dragon wouldn't easily make a move. At most, it would protect his safety at critical moments. High-level magical beasts all had their own temperament and dignity. But even so, everyone looked at him as if they were looking at a future powerhouse. With his talent, it was only a matter of time before he became a level 9 summoner. Young Master Yuan Tianqin naturally enjoyed the best resources in the family, so the Yuan family's younger generation accepted this wholeheartedly. But who was Yuan Tianyi? Trash who wasn't even a summoner. What right did she have to enjoy the same treatment as eldest young master? Chapter 1441. The master of the Yuan family knew that his actions would bring harm to the third miss, Yuan Tianyi. However, he was still the master of the family. It was true that he had to follow the ancestor's words, but he also wanted to see how the third miss could impress the ancestor. He didn't need to do anything. There were plenty of young people in the family. Whether they were from the direct line of descent or the collateral line, they were all fighting for those resources. Young people were the most hot-blooded. If Yuan Tianyi wanted to enjoy that kind of treatment, she naturally had to show the corresponding strength. The ancestor of the Yuan family didn't tell anyone about the appearance of an ancient summoner's bloodline in the family. Ancient summoners were too rare. There would always be some people who couldn't help but be jealous. The Yuan family was strong, but it didn't necessarily mean that they could guard against it. It was better to let the child make a name for herself. At that time, she would naturally have enough strength to protect herself. Even if her identity was exposed, others could only watch with envy. In the law enforcement patriarch's courtyard, he had seen the power of that man with his own eyes. He also saw his cloud-soaring eagle was so scared that even the ancestor was alarmed. Then, the ancestor gave such an order. He didn't believe that man's words that he was the third miss, Yuan Tianyi's contracted magical beast. He probably thought that the man and the third miss had something to do with each other, so the ancestor valued the third miss so much. What was his identity? He restrained himself for a long time and finally couldn't help but summon the cloud-soaring eagle. As soon as the cloud-soaring eagle came out, its body tensed up. Although it wasn't nearby, it could feel that person's breath. Obviously, that person was still in the mansion. The law enforcement patriarch looked at him and became more curious about the man's identity. The cloud-soaring eagle heard his words and was silent for a moment. Then it said a name softly. Looking at the law enforcement patriarch's eyes, the cloud-soaring eagle felt a little better. It didn't make sense that others didn't know about it when it was worried and scared. Summoners and magical beasts should share blessings and misfortunes together. It patted the law enforcement patriarch with its wings and said very kindly, "Remember not to tell others about this matter. That person's temper is not very good. If he hears others talking about him, he may be unhappy." The law enforcement patriarch nodded blankly. Then, the cloud-soaring eagle left in a good mood, leaving patriarch of law enforcement sitting in the yard for a long time with mixed feelings. It was actually that person. Elder of law enforcement felt that he should treat the third miss better in the future. In another courtyard, Yuan Qin was complaining about the dishes on the table. When the servants in the room saw that something was wrong, they quietly retreated. Their master and the third miss of the direct line of descent had been at odds for a long time. Now that they knew that the third miss had risen to the top in a single bound, it would be strange if they were happy. That's right. Yuan Qin was not happy right now. She was very unhappy. She was a person who had experienced that scene with her own eyes. Just like Patriarch of Law Enforcement, she did not think that it was Gu Xingyin's fault at all. Instead, she thought that Gu Xingyin had benefited from the mysterious man in red. On the one hand, she secretly envied Gu Xingyin's good luck, and on the other hand, she spurned Yuan Tianyi, that waste, who could only rely on these unconventional means to reach the sky in one step. If you have the ability, then speak with your talent. Chapter 1442. In short, the third miss, Yuan Tianyi, was really famous in the Yuan family. Many people turned their gazes towards the small courtyard that was usually quiet and kept a low profile. Thoughts that only they knew were running through their minds. All of this, Gu Xingyin, who was still sleeping, didn't know. Lin Yuan knew, and he probably knew the thoughts of the Yasuhara family. It's just that he had always been very arrogant, and he didn't put such a little test in his heart. Wasn't it just the resources of the Yuan family? If the little girl wanted it, he could give her as much as she wanted. When Gu Xingyin really woke up, it was already 3 days later. In these 3 days, there were many people who came to inquire about the news in the name of visiting, but without exception, they couldn't even enter the door. Lin Yuan was a little polite to the Yuan family's old ancestor, but what were the others? Was it worth him to receive them? Those people who hit a nail on the head could only look unsightly. In the end, they still had to go back. First, the current third Miss Yuan Tianyi was no longer the little transparent person from before. They could no longer openly make things difficult for her. Second, she had a very powerful expert by her side. Even if they wanted to use force, they were not the other party's opponent. But there was always resentment. These people usually had their eyes on top of their heads, and they didn't put Yuan Tianyi in their eyes at all. As a result, now that she was in power, it was difficult to even see her. The rumor quickly spread in the Yuan family, saying that the third miss, Yuan Tianyi, had her eyes on top of her head and looked down on them young masters and young ladies. Gu Xingyin didn't know at the moment that she just slept and took on such a bad name. But even if she knew, she wouldn't care. Only those who couldn't do anything about it would work on their words. As soon as she woke up, she met Lin Yuan's burning eyes. Seeing that she finally woke up, even if he knew that the blood awakening was not a dangerous thing, Lin Yuan was still relieved. He said with some disgust, "You can really sleep, and you slept for 3 days. 3 days? Gu Xingyin looked at the person who didn't look tired at all, and her heart was moved. So you sat here and watched me for 3 days? Lin Yuan suddenly revealed a smile. His eyes became affectionate as he stared at Gu Xingyin. That's right, I've been by your side for 3 days. Are you touched? Do you want to marry me? He was just joking. He didn't expect Gu Xingyin to nod without hesitation. Sure. Lin Yuan, Gu Xingyin said with a smile, you're so good-looking and powerful. No matter how you look at it, I'm the one who benefits, right? This girl. Lin Yuan smiled helplessly and said, are you hungry? I'll go get you something to eat. Gu Xingyin shook her head. She did not avoid Lin Yuan. She stretched out her right palm, and a moment later, a green light condensed into 2 small green fruits. She looked at Lin Yuan's astonished eyes and handed him a fruit. This is my little secret. Don't tell anyone else. Since waking up from this sleep, she felt that the power in her body had grown for a long time, and even the power of her soul seemed to have been strengthened. This level of creation didn't cost her much strength at all. Lin Yuan held the small fruit in his hand and looked at Gu Xingyin with surprise and even a trace of seriousness. Chapter 1443. You didn't take it out of the storage space, but yourself. Changed it? Lin Yuan asked. Changed it out? Gu Xingyin was a little dissatisfied with this statement. She retorted, it's obviously created. Lin Yuan looked at her pouting and staring at him. He only felt that it was extremely cute. He joked, I say, girl, in addition to the ancient summoner bloodline, you don't have any tree demon bloodline, do you? Otherwise, how can it bear fruit? This time, Gu Xingyin could tell that he was joking with her. This man. She thought for a moment and suddenly stretched out her palm again. A moment later, a budding red rose appeared in her palm. She handed the flower to Lin Yuan. This is for you. There were no roses in this world. Lin Yuan looked at this strange flower, reached out and took it. He put it on the tip of his nose and sniffed it. It's very fragrant and beautiful. Gu Xingyin laughed. She didn't tell Lin Yuan the meaning of the red rose. She couldn't let this man be too cocky. At this time, Lin Yuan put down the rose with a serious face and said to Gu Xingyin, what's with your strange ability? Gu Xingyin stared at him blankly. I don't know. I suddenly had it some time ago. Could it be that this is also the ability of the ancient summoner? This ancient summoner's saying was told to her by Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan shook his head. The ancient summoner can't do this. He had lived for a long time. Of course, he knew that the ancient summoner was only a little more powerful than the ordinary summoner. But the ability Gu Xingyin showed was already creation. The more powerful he was, the stronger Lin Yuan's perception of certain things was. He could see that Gu Xingyin's method was no longer something that a simple person could have. What was it? Lin Yuan didn't dare to say. He suddenly became a little uncertain about the future. Originally, he thought that with his ability, no matter what, he could always protect the little girl in this life, so that she wouldn't have any worries or depression for the rest of her life. However, Gu Xingyin's performance exceeded his expectations. He was afraid that something unpredictable would happen to Gu Xingyin. If Gu Xingyin knew about his thoughts, Gu Xingyin would definitely comfort him not to think too much. She was just lucky enough to draw a useful and high-class golden finger. It was definitely not as complicated as Lin Yuan thought. However, Lin Yuan didn't tell Gu Xingyin about his worries at all. He was afraid that she would be afraid and worried. Therefore, Gu Xingyin did not know that her actions had caused her lover to worry. In the end, Lin Yuan asked a lot of questions. After learning that Gu Xingyin's ability could only create plants, his heart was relieved a little. If it was really omnipotent, he would be even more worried. He looked at Gu Xingyin seriously and said, who else knows about this ability of yours? When he said this, his heart was already filled with murderous intent. The less people knew about this kind of thing, the better. Gu Xingyin shook her head and blinked at him. I'm not stupid. How could I tell others about this kind of thing? You're the only one I told. In fact, if it wasn't for her lover, even if it was her contractual magical beast, Gu Xingyin wouldn't dare to tell Lin Yuan about her ability. Lin Yuan's heart suddenly softened because of Gu Xingyin's words. Softened. In her mind, he was different from everyone else. He was the most special. Chapter 1444. Gu Xingyin had just woken up. After eating something and taking a comfortable bath, someone came over. Since Gu Xingyin had woken up, Lin Yuan's mood was much better. Naturally, these things were up to Gu Xingyin to decide. The person who came in was still Gu Xingyin's old acquaintance, Yuan Tianheng. Since Yuan Tianheng entered the door, his eyes were fixed on Lin Yuan. Was it this man? It was rumored that the patriarch gave Yuan Tianyi the highest level of treatment. As for his big black, ever since he entered the door, his imposing and ostentatious spirit had all been retracted. Even his tail was obediently tucked in. Big Black was just an ordinary dog. At most, he was a little more spiritual than an ordinary dog, but he still couldn't compare to a real magical beast. He didn't know the man in red in front of him, but he felt that the other party's aura was very scary. If it wasn't for his master holding him, he would have run away immediately with his tail between his legs. Scared the dog to death. Lin Yuan was looked at by this teenager with such a gaze, but he didn't feel uncomfortable at all. It was rare that he didn't get angry. Not to mention anything else, just this point alone made Gu Xingyin curious. But Yuan Tianheng was here, so she couldn't ask. Gu Xingyin looked at Yuan Tianheng with a smile. I wonder what elder brother Tianheng came to me for. Yuan Tianheng should be the person she had the best impression of after coming to the Yuan family. Although his talent wasn't the best, his determination was rare. As long as he didn't die prematurely, such a person's future achievements would definitely not be bad. Yuan Tianheng's twilight retracted from Lin Yuan's body and fell on Gu Xingyin's body. His sister seemed to have gained some weight during this period of time, and her pale face seemed to have a little more color. And she looked a lot better than before. Realizing that his thoughts had drifted to some messy place, Yuan Tianheng coughed dryly. He still had that cold appearance, looking at Gu Xingyin and said, I heard that younger sister Tianyi received the family's first-rate share, so I came to congratulate you. In addition, such an opportunity is really rare. Sister Tianyi should work hard to cultivate and not waste such resources. His words were not polite. Those who did not know him would definitely think that he was mocking Gu Xingyin, but Gu Xingyin herself could see the sincerity in his eyes. Yuan Tianheng truly felt that since Yuan Tianyi could get such an opportunity, she should work harder to cultivate. Otherwise, it would be a waste. As for jealousy, he didn't think there was anything to be jealous of. If he wanted to be nurtured better by the family and obtain more resources, then he would have to cultivate well, work hard to show his strength, and speak with facts. As for Yuan Tianyi's situation, whether it was a whim of the head of the family or because of the master behind her, it was all her own luck. Yuan Tianheng had never been jealous of others. If he had the time, he might as well spend it cultivating or building a relationship with Dahe. Sensing that he was sincerely admonishing her, Gu Xingyin's smile became more sincere. Don't worry, brother Tianheng. I won't let you down. There were too many things that she wouldn't let down, and she also had the confidence that she wouldn't let them down. After receiving Gu Xingyin's affirmative reply, Yuan Tianheng nodded and turned to leave without saying a word. Gu Xingyin secretly laughed. This Yuan Tianheng was a person with an interesting personality. Lin Yuan originally thought that this kid was not bad, but when he saw Gu Xingyin looking at his back and smiling happily, he suddenly became unhappy. Chapter 1445. He said coldly, this brat is too straightforward and unreasonable. I'm afraid he'll offend a lot of people in the future. Gu Xingyin turned her head strangely, as if she couldn't understand why Lin Yuan would say such a thing. Seeing her gaze fall on him, Lin Yuan's unhappy mood dissipated a lot, but he still said with a straight face, little girl, you'd better stay away from him in the future. Otherwise, I'm afraid you'll be implicated in the future. You're the ruler of the 9 hells purgatory, and you're worried about being implicated? Isn't cultivating wholeheartedly and ignoring the affairs of the world your favorite temperament? Gu Xingyin lowered her head and thought for a moment. He clearly didn't get angry when Yuan Tianheng looked at Lin Yuan like that at first, which meant that he admired Yuan Tianheng. Why did he suddenly become like this? After carefully thinking about all the things that happened after Yuan Tianheng came over, Gu Xingyin came up with a conjecture that made her not know whether to laugh or cry. This man, could he be jealous? She thought for a moment, then suddenly walked to Lin Yuan's side, raised her hand, and hugged his waist. Lin Yuan was stunned for a moment, and then his heart softened. Softening. Gu Xingyin raised her head to look at him, and only his figure was left in her eyes. Big brother Tianheng is the person who treats me the best in this Yuan mansion. Although his personality is a bit cold, he's still a good person. I don't have a biological brother, so I've always treated him as my brother. When he heard the words Big Brother Tianheng, Lin Yuan was still a little unhappy, but after hearing the words, his mood changed. When he heard Gu Xingyin say that she was loved, his heart immediately ached. When Gu Xingyin said that Yuan Tianheng was her brother, the ruler of the 9 hells purgatory, who didn't have a firm moral integrity, suddenly changed his view of Yuan Tianheng. He picked up Gu Xingyin and slowly said, "Your clan brother is not bad. He will definitely be extraordinary in the future." Gu Xingyin almost laughed out loud. She finally understood that this person was really jealous just now. However, Lin Yuan hugged her, and every word seemed to be a declaration. In the future, with me by your side, I will properly protect you, pamper you, and no one will ever bully and humiliate you again. Gu Xingyin's heart trembled. She looked at this man and felt a warm current in her heart. She stretched out her hand and hugged Lin Yuan tightly. She said with a smile, "You said it yourself. You have to pamper me and not let anyone bully me." Of course. Gu Xingyin felt that the atmosphere was too flirtatious. She raised her eyebrows and said, "No, how can I be bullied? I'm going to bully others." The tenderness that had just surged up in Lin Yuan's heart instantly dissipated. Looking at the little baby in front of him, he laughed and said, "All right, all right, all right. When the time comes, I'll help you bully others." Gu Xingyin said confidently, "You said it yourself. If I cause trouble, I'll tell them that you're the ruler of the 9 hells purgatory and let them settle the score with you." If anyone else dared to say that, they would have been slapped to death by Lin Yuan. But the one who said that was Gu Xingyin. Lin Yuan felt that this little girl was born to subdue him. Otherwise, how could she casually draw a summoning array and summon him out? Not only that, he even asked to form a contract with someone as if he was possessed. He simply had no bottom line. If it was half a year ago, if someone said that he would be like this in the future because of a person, Lin Yuan would definitely not believe it and would teach him to speak properly. Perhaps, this was the so-called natural devil star. However, he was willing to endure it. Chapter 1446. Therefore, when faced with Gu Xingyin's words, Lin Yuan only smiled and said, "You only need to report. There really aren't many who would dare to cause trouble in my 9 hells purgatory. If there really were, he would just throw them out." Just like that, the two of them spent the rest of the afternoon together. At night, other than the person who came to deliver dinner, there was another person. Gu Xingyin raised her eyebrows as she held the exquisite jade bracelet in her hand. Just as Yuan Tianheng said, the Yuan residents gave her the highest treatment. This jade bracelet was the key to enter the family's cultivation hall. Not just anyone could enter the Yuan family's cultivation hall. At the very least, only those with intermediate summoner talent and above had the qualifications to enter. The previous Yuan Tianyi didn't have the qualifications at all. Gu Xingyin played with the jade bracelet in her hand. Lin Yuan frowned and said, "What kind of cultivation hall is this? A few brats who haven't even entered sainthood are just messing around. What's there to go?" Gu Xingyin, she always thought that she could be very arrogant, but in front of Lin Yuan, she realized that she was really too young. The Yuan family's cultivation hall's hall master was a 9th-rank summoner and there were more than 10 advanced summoners. Even in the entire Dragon Phoenix Empire, such strength could be considered as one of the most powerful. It was said that even the imperial family wanted to send their disciples into the Yuan family, but they were rejected by the Yuan family's patriarch because the family's cultivation hall doesn't allow outsiders. This also showed the Yuan family's status in the empire. However, in Lin Yuan's eyes, this cultivation hall was just a small brat who hasn't even reached sainthood. Gu Xingyin helplessly face-bombed. Did this big boss really think that sainthood experts were cabbages? How could a mighty saint-level expert have the time to teach a group of children? At this time, Gu Xingyin finally understood that the best way to show off wasn't really showing off, but when you thought he was showing off, what he said was the truth. Lin Yuan didn't notice Gu Xingyin's inner ridicule at all. Instead, he said very naturally, "Don't go. I'll teach you. Basically, I've dabbled in all kinds of cultivation methods that are commonly used on the continent." His words were completely modest. Gu Xingyin remembered very clearly that when Yuan Tianyi went to push the big boss in the original plot, she deliberately highlighted that this Lin Quan was a terrifying existence without any flaws. How was he just dabbling in it? He was the red lotus born in the 9 Serenities purgatory flame. He had lived for an unknown amount of time. The long and boring years were enough for him to study all the cultivation scriptures of the entire continent. If anyone in the magical beast continent heard Lin Yuan say that he wanted to teach them, they would be willing to cry and kneel down to call him father. But Gu Xingyin, who was fresh and unconventional, said that she wanted to refuse. Lin Yuan was not angry. In fact, when facing Gu Xingyin, he did not have the emotion of anger at all. He asked why. Gu Xingyin smiled, but her eyes were a little cold. She said, "Aren't there many of my brothers and sisters of the same clan quietly waiting to see me make a fool of myself? In order to not let them come over one by one and annoy me, I'd better let them see enough at once." Lin Yuan simply loved her like this. Her slightly narrowed eyes were full of scheming light, making people want to pick her up and kick her into their own pocket. Except for him, no one could see her. Chapter 1447. So, in front of the person you like, principles and bottom lines, what are those things? Gu Xingyin's thoughts were right. There were many young masters and young ladies in the Yuan family. The next day, they were all waiting at the entrance of the cultivation hall, ready to see her make a fool of herself. The Yuan family's cultivation hall was sealed. In order to prevent those young masters and young ladies from being disturbed, a sealing array was set up outside, and outsiders were not allowed to enter. And that small exquisite jade bracelet was the key to opening the array. But the jade bracelet alone was not enough. After each person put their jade bracelet on, the array would temporarily open a door. This door needed to be opened by the person who picked up the key to enter the real cultivation hall. And that door was not something that could be casually pushed open. At least, if it wasn't for the careful nurturing of a famous teacher since childhood, an ordinary teenage girl wanting to push it open was tantamount to a fool's dream. In the past, the Yuan family's children who were able to obtain jade bracelets were all talented. Such a door was naturally not a problem for them. However, it was said that Yuan Tianyi was a low-level talent trash. In all these years, the family had never nurtured her. Thinking about it, this door, for this unknown third young miss, was afraid that it would be a bit difficult. Such a person suddenly enjoyed the family's first-class treatment for no reason. If she couldn't even enter the cultivation hall, it was conceivable that the third young miss' reputation of being a trash would be greatly spread in the family. When Gu Xingyin arrived at the cultivation hall, she discovered that there were already more than 10 young boys and girls of about the same age standing there. These people could obviously directly enter the door, but they were all waiting here. It was self-evident what they were thinking in their hearts. Gu Xingyin saw Yuan Qin standing among them at a glance. This woman really spared no effort to see her make a fool of herself. Gu Xingyin came alone. In order to cooperate with this group of people's performance, she specifically told Lin Yuan not to follow. However, for an existence at Lin Yuan's level, it was not important whether others were present or not. His spiritual power could even control the entire capital, and he could appear here in the blink of an eye. Gu Xingyin stood in front of the array formation and took out the jade bracelet. Upon seeing this, the dozen or so young boys and girls all looked at Gu Xingyin's hand with jealousy. They had spent a lot of effort to get a chance to enter the cultivation hall to cultivate and study. How could Yuan Tianyi, this trash, enjoy the same treatment as them? No, the treatment she enjoyed was several levels higher than theirs. Other than jealousy, there was also a hint of schadenfreude in their eyes. This third young miss looked thin and slender. TSK, they didn't know if this small body of hers could open the door to the cultivation hall. Gu Xingyin stretched out her hand and was about to place the jade bracelet in the center of the array formation when everyone's attention was drawn to this side. Her lips curled into a smile, and she put her hand down. Gu Xingyin turned around and looked at the group of people. Seeing the disappointment in their eyes, she asked doubtfully, "Are you all not going in?" She pointed at the array as she spoke. Everyone thought in their hearts, "I just want to see you make a fool of yourself, that's why I'm standing here waiting." Of course, when they didn't know the identity of the expert behind the third young miss, they wouldn't say this out loud. Only Yuan Qin couldn't bear it. Chapter 1448. Because she was the one who understood Yuan Tianyi the most, and also the one who knew her the most. It was because of this that she couldn't understand. How did this weak and small Yuan Tianyi catch the eyes of such a man? Thinking back to that day when she caught a glimpse of the man in Gu Xingyin's small courtyard, Yuan Qin felt her heart beating wildly. She was still young, so it wasn't to the extent that she would attract any young girl's affection. She simply thought that the man was too good-looking. All the so-called beauties she had seen in her life were all mediocre in front of that man. How could a man like that, who was strong enough to speak with the Zhen family's old ancestor, take a fancy to a trash like Tianyi Uehara? Yuan Qin couldn't figure it out. The more she couldn't figure it out, the more she thought about it. The more she thought about it, the more she envied Gu Xingyin. It was as if this was a dead end. Perhaps in Yuan Qin's eyes, only if Yuan Tianyi returned to her previous weak and inconspicuous self would she be able to erase the unwillingness in her heart. It was a pity that Yuan Qin's wish would never be fulfilled. So, while everyone else was still observing and thinking, Yuan Qin, bravely, stood up on behalf of the public. She looked at Gu Xingyin with a mocking smile on her face, and said in a sharp tone, "We heard that third sister was coming to the cultivation hall today. We were afraid that third sister had never been here before and came to the wrong place, so we waited here." Gu Xingyin glanced at the people standing here, and the system quickly transmitted their information to Gu Xingyin's mind. With a glance, she found that most of these people were disciples of the branch family, and most of them weren't outstanding in the Zhen family. But when she thought about it, the eyes of those with real talent weren't limited to the Zhen family's cultivation hall. They didn't even have enough time to cultivate every day, so where would they find the time to make things difficult for Gu Xingyin, the third sister who suddenly appeared? Whether it was a stone or a treasure, there would naturally be time to examine it. What did it have to do with them? The ridicule in Yuan Qin's words was too obvious. She was just short of saying that Tianyi used to be trash and never came here before, and that she was only here for a short period of time. If it was someone with courage, they probably wouldn't be able to stand it. What Yuan Qin wanted to see the most was Gu Xingyin's humiliation turn into anger. At that time, whether she opened the door in a fit of pique or had a conflict with her, it wouldn't be her problem. Unfortunately, despite her good plan, Gu Xingyin was unwilling to play along with her. Gu Xingyin took a step back and cleared the space. "Sister Yuan Qin's words make me feel ashamed. I'll have to trouble everyone to wait here. First come, first served. Everyone, please go first." Gu Xingyin looked very sincere. Everyone, was this girl really stupid or just pretending to be stupid? They obviously wanted to see her make a fool of herself, okay? Who has the time to care about you? Yuan Qin knew that Yuan Tianyi was definitely pretending to be stupid. She's SSS but she's actings of acts of A. Lin Yuan sat in the small courtyard and watched Gu Xingyin deal with that group of idiots with a smile. He couldn't help but reveal a smile. As expected of his little girl, she was the most beautiful no matter what. Especially when compared to that group of idiots, TSK, this Zhen family is just like that. The Zhen family's old ancestor expressed that he had taken an arrow to the knee. Chapter 1449. If you all don't want to go in, then get out of the way. A cold voice sounded. Gu Xingyin heard the familiar voice and knew who it was. Sure enough, she turned her head and saw Yuan Tianheng standing there quietly with his big dog that never left his side. He clearly didn't do anything, but everyone subconsciously stayed away from him. Only Gu Xingyin looked at him with a smile. Brother Tianheng, good morning. Yuan Tianheng glanced at her, but before he could speak, the dog called Dahe happily broke free from his master's hand and rushed towards Gu Xingyin. Looking at the aggressive posture, Gu Xingyin felt that this dog was going to suffer. Sure enough, just as Dahe was about to touch Gu Xingyin, there seemed to be a layer of invisible power that burst out from Gu Xingyin's body. Dahe was directly hit and flew out. This unforeseen event happened so quickly that even Yuan Tianheng couldn't react in time. Fortunately, that layer of power didn't mean to hurt people. Dahe was only thrown out and was steadily put back on the ground. However, the experience of flying in the sky seemed to have frightened this stupid dog. He whimpered twice and ran towards his master, rubbing against his leg to seek comfort. Gu Xingyin, she couldn't bear to see this scene. When she first saw Dahe, she was deceived by his majestic appearance and thought that he was a dog that was as tall and powerful as his appearance. However, the hard facts told her that the truth was not so. This was just a stupid dog that maintained a cold and fierce appearance. Once the opponent showed a bit of fierceness, he would immediately cower. At this moment, Dahe, who turned cowardly in a second, was lying in front of his master to seek comfort. Gu Xingyin didn't know if it was an illusion, but she felt that Yuan Tianheng looked at her with a trace of gratitude in his eyes. Gu Xingyin. However, Yuan Tianheng didn't say anything to Gu Xingyin. After he nodded at her, he didn't look at the others anymore. He took out the jade bracelet hanging on his waist and pressed it on the formation. As a layer of faint light floated up, a door made of white jade appeared in front of Yuan Tianheng. Then, he stretched out his hand, and a faint white light appeared in his palm. He slowly pushed the door open. The people standing outside could not see what was behind the door at all. Yuan Tianheng's movements were very slow, as if he wanted to let Gu Xingyin see it clearly. Then, he held Dahe's hand, turned around and said to Gu Xingyin, "I'll wait for you inside." Then, he walked in. After he entered, the white jade door slowly closed. Then, the light dissipated, and the entire door slowly disappeared. Gu Xingyin took a step forward. She placed her jade bracelet on top of the formation. Before the white jade door appeared, she suddenly turned around and glanced at these people. Her smile was extremely brilliant. "I know that everyone is afraid that I'm new here and unfamiliar with everything. Perhaps I won't even be able to enter this cultivation hall. I appreciate everyone's kindness, but I heard that there is a time limit for the cultivation hall's morning class every day. I'm afraid that everyone will be late." Hearing her say this, everyone's expression changed greatly as they looked at the stone clock on the formation. There was only a few moments left before the morning class. At this moment, the white jade door appeared. Everyone saw a layer of faint green light appear in Gu Xingyin's palm. She lightly hit the white jade door, and the door obediently opened. How did she do it? Wasn't she a piece of trash who had never cultivated before? Chapter 1450. Everyone's gaze fell on Yuan Qin, who had been sparing no effort to proclaim that the third miss was a waste. She had always been the one to say how much of a waste Yuan Tianyi was, and that she was simply an insult to the Yuan family's bloodline. Yuan Qin's face was also green and white. She stared at Gu Xingyin, as if she didn't know how she did it. At this time, the door was completely open. Gu Xingyin raised her head to look at the stone clock on the wall. Her movements were extremely slow as she squatted down, as if she was tidying her skirt. Then, she leisurely rubbed her wrists, as if her movements just now had caused her wrists great discomfort. Her actions caused many people to feel contempt in their hearts. Such a small matter could actually make her this tired. It seemed that even though the third miss had barely opened the white jade door, she was still a waste in her bones. However, when Gu Xingyin finally walked through the white jade door with ease, everyone finally realized that it was already late. They looked at the wall. It was over. The Yuan family's cultivation hall had always been strict. One of the things that those teachers couldn't tolerate the most was that they didn't treat cultivation seriously. Thus, the group of people who had followed Gu Xingyin into the cultivation hall were all brought out by the strict teachers to have a good discussion. That was all for later. When Gu Xingyin entered, it did not take much effort for him to find his seat. Why? Because the Yuan family had remembered the ancestors' order to allocate the first-class resources to the third Miss, Yuan Tianyi. This cultivation hall was naturally allocated according to the first class. The cultivation hall's seats were also divided according to rank. The first-class seats were naturally the most front and most center seats. Gu Xingyin looked at the empty seat in front of her. She knew in her heart that it belonged to her. In fact, the moment she entered, all of the Yuan family's disciples in the cultivation hall turned to look at her. Among these gazes, there was curiosity, scrutiny, and disdain. If it was someone who hadn't seen the world, they would really be frightened by these gazes. But what kind of person was Gu Xingyin? She had even been an empress. Why would she be afraid of a group of youths whose average age was no more than 13 years old? She calmly walked towards her seat. Seeing her like this, the teacher who was standing at the side silently nodded in his heart. Not to mention other things, her temperament are indeed worthy of praise. However, just as Gu Xingyin reached her seat, before she could sit down, something unexpected happened. The young man sitting next to Gu Xingyin suddenly raised his head and looked coldly at Gu Xingyin. The corner of his mouth curved into a cold arc. I never sit next to trash. As soon as the young man finished speaking, a powerful aura rose from his body and unreservedly pressed down on Gu Xingyin. From the looks of it, he actually wanted to take Gu Xingyin down a notch. The teacher next to him was shocked. He did not expect this to happen. He glanced at the person who attacked. It was Yuan Tianqin, the first young master of the Yuan family, the precious child of the Yuan family. He was one of the top geniuses in the entire Dragon Phoenix Empire. Looking at this person's appearance, it was obvious that he was dissatisfied with the third miss sitting next to him. His fingers twitched in his sleeves, but in the end, he did not make a move to stop him. Forget it, it was better not to disobey this first young master. Chapter 1451. Gu Xingyin didn't expect that the young master of the Yuan family would behave like this. She carefully sensed that Yuan Tianqin was only using his aura to oppress her. He didn't try to kill her. Even so, if Yuan Tianyi had never cultivated before, she would have been forced to kneel down and make a fool of herself. This was the first time she officially appeared in front of all the elite disciples of the Yuan family. If she made a fool of herself, how could she raise her head in the future? All these thoughts only lasted for a moment. The powerful aura had already arrived in front of Gu Xingyin. Gu Xingyin snorted coldly. She didn't dodge and looked directly at Yuan Tianqin. When the mountain-like aura fell on her, it was like ice meeting the sun. It didn't even cause a splash and disappeared. Yuan Tianqin's eyes lit up. His icy eyes melted a little. He finally looked at Gu Xingyin and said, "You're not bad. You're sitting next to me." Gu Xingyin sneered. This young master Yuan Tianqin probably thought that she was some kind of delicious cake. Whether or not she, Gu Xingyin, was qualified to sit here wasn't up to Yuan Tianqin. She came here today just to see the geniuses of the Yuan family. She also wanted to trick someone while she was at it. Now that she had achieved her goal, there was no need to stay any longer. Especially when there was a young master sitting next to her who thought that he could ascend to heaven. Gu Xingyin carefully looked at Yuan Tianqin. She suddenly realized that this person was really good-looking. His black clothes made his white skin look even whiter and more translucent. He looked like he was carved out of ice. He was as cold as ice and as exquisite as snow. It was no wonder that such a person with such a powerful talent would develop such an arrogant personality. However, no matter how good-looking and talented he was, Gu Xingyin's face couldn't be stepped on by such a person. Hearing Yuan Tianqin's words, Gu Xingyin only glanced at the seat next to her and didn't sit down. She only raised her eyebrows and glanced at Yuan Tianqin with a smile on her face. However, the words she said made the entire Yuan clan's cultivation hall fall into silence. Unfortunately, I have the same habit as young master Yuan Tianqin. I can't have trash sitting next to me. Everyone in the cultivation hall felt that Yuan Tianyi was crazy. Did she really think that just because the clan had appreciated her, she could go to the heavens? So what if he felt uncomfortable? If you want to diss young master, at least come up with a proper reason. Who didn't know that Yuan Tianqin, the eldest son of the Yuan family, was a genius? She, Yuan Tianyi, was a trash who relied on the family head to enter the cultivation hall through the back door. She actually dared to mock the eldest young master? Yuan Tianqin was also stunned when he heard this. Then, he realized that the girl in front of him was mocking him. As expected, he was so angry that he laughed. Yuan Tianqin, ever since he was born, he had been the pride of the pride of the pride of the pride of the pride. He had grown up in the midst of everyone's reverence and admiration. He didn't expect that today, he would actually meet someone who dared to mock him. Yuan Tianqin felt that it was very refreshing. However, after this moment of novelty passed, he couldn't stop his monstrous anger. This little girl actually dared to mock him? He coldly stood up and looked straight at Gu Shengyin. The words that came out of his mouth were as cold as ice. What you just said, say it again. Chapter 1452. The atmosphere in the cultivation hall suddenly became tense. However, the majority of the people present were excited. In their eyes, this wasn't a big deal. Wasn't it just that the newcomer, Yuan Tianyi, didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth and offended the eldest young master? They were waiting to see what would happen to the third young miss. TSK, TSK, TSK. They had never seen someone who dared to challenge the eldest young master twice in the Yuan family. Seeing that the situation wasn't going to be easy to clean up, the teacher who had been standing in the background finally stood up. He still remembered that the family head had once said that he would take care of the newcomer, the third young miss. Now, it seemed that this matter was going to get out of hand. He wasn't afraid of getting out of hand, and he didn't care if the third young miss lost face. He was only afraid that the eldest young master, Yuan Tianqin, would lose his temper. If he didn't hold back, the third young miss, who had just arrived today, would get into trouble in the cultivation hall. The teacher lightly coughed and looked at Gu Shengyin with a reproachful gaze. All right, don't be angry. Third young miss, properly apologize to the eldest young master so that we can officially start the lesson. Apologize? Gu Shengyin only felt that the teacher's words were unreasonable. Gu Shengyin sneered. When this eldest young master insulted me and even attacked me, why didn't I see you immediately intervene and ask the eldest young master to apologize to me? As soon as she said this, the surrounding people couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. This third young miss really had some guts. Not only did she dare to challenge the eldest young master, she even dared to challenge the teacher of the cultivation hall. Did she not want to stay in the cultivation hall anymore? Well said. Gu Shengyin didn't want to stay in the cultivation hall anymore. However, other people didn't know what she was thinking. They all felt that this third young miss had been provoked to the point that her mind wasn't clear anymore. She even compared herself to the eldest young master. She didn't even look at the gap between them. The eldest young master and her were like the bright moon in the sky and the smelly ditch in the wilderness. Where did she get her face from? Most people thought so in their hearts, but only Yuan Qin said it out loud. Yuan Qin had always disliked Yuan Tianyi. In the past, they simply thought that Yuan Tianyi was lucky and easy to bully. Now, it was complete jealousy and hatred. She was jealous of her good fortune and hated a good-for-nothing like her, yet she dared to live so arrogantly. Therefore, when no one wanted to stand out, Yuan Qin stood out. In fact, what she thought in her heart was right. Now that she came out, she could ridicule Yuan Tianyi. She could also sell her favor in front of the eldest son, Yuan Tianqin. What if he was lucky enough to make young master remember him? No matter how Yuan Qin thought about it, she felt that it was worth it. It was just that she didn't think that if she could think of something, how could others not think of it? If there were really so many benefits, and there were so many smart people in the Yuan family, would it be Yuan Qin's turn to take advantage of it? In the end, before the third young Mrs. backer was revealed, those people simply did not dare to offend her too much. If they were to fail miserably, it would truly be an undeserved disaster. Only Yuan Qin was stupid. Not only was she stupid, but she also liked to show off. Therefore, after she heard Gu Xingyin's words, she stood out and scolded, "Yuan Tianyi, I say, why don't you take a mirror and look at yourself? A good-for-nothing like you doesn't even have enough status to carry the eldest young master's shoes. You still have the face to compare yourself with him?" Chapter 1453. When Yuan Qin said this, many people had a deep expression on their faces. Even if these people thought highly of themselves, when facing the eldest young master, Yuan Tianqin, they couldn't help but lower their posture. There was no other way. Yuan Tianqin's talent was really too strong. They really couldn't compare. This third Miss Yuan Tianyi, who had always been invisible, was really arrogant to the extreme. She actually dared to open her mouth and compare herself with the eldest young master. The eldest young master had the ability and confidence to say that he wouldn't sit with trash. How could Yuan Tianyi be so shameless? Not only did the disciples of the Yuan family think so, but even the teacher who had been standing on the side thought so. Only Yuan Tianheng, who was sitting in his seat, looked at Gu Xingyin with some confusion. Looking carefully, there was a trace of worry in his eyes. He thought expressionlessly. According to his understanding, Yuan Tianyi didn't seem like a brainless person. Then why would she say such a thing? It was very likely that she had someone behind her. Thinking of the man in red he saw in the courtyard before, Yuan Tianheng had a rough idea in his heart. However, he still had some worries in his heart. The Yuan family wasn't an ordinary family. Even if the man in red was very strong, could he still challenge the entire Yuan family? Yuan Qin was also certain of this, so she dared to scold Gu Xingyin. If she knew the true identity of Lin Yuan, even if she was given 100 guts, she wouldn't dare to say a word. Gu Xingyin glanced at Yuan Qin and smiled disapprovingly. "Yuan Qin, you're shouting so hard now. Remember to ask your master to give you more rewards later." Her disdainful gaze and tone, as well as the malice in her words, were clearly displayed. Yuan Qin trembled with anger. Enough. The teacher who was ridiculed by Gu Xingyin before had an ugly expression. He looked at Gu Xingyin coldly. Yuan Tianyi spoke without restraint. She contradicted her teacher and slandered her own family. As punishment, she will kneel in the cultivation hall for 2 hours. As soon as the teacher spoke, the gloating expression on Yuan Qin's face was reflected. However, Yuan Tianqin wasn't satisfied. He looked coldly at Gu Xingyin and said, "What's the point of keeping this tongue that doesn't know how to speak? Sir, you're being too kind." He actually opened his mouth and wanted to cut off Gu Xingyin's tongue. Hearing the dissatisfaction in eldest young master's tone, the teacher felt helpless. This eldest young master looked cold and aloof, but in reality, his methods were crueler than anyone else's. He still remembered that there was once a Yuan family disciple who offended him in the cultivation hall. He broke all 4 of the disciple's limbs and threw the disciple out to beg in the snow. In any case, he never saw that unlucky Yuan family disciple again. Yuan Tianqin didn't even try to hide this matter. However, his talent was there. The entire Yuan family saw him as the hope of the future. The rule of not killing one's own family was like a fart to him. This teacher didn't have a good impression of Gu Xingyin. It was just that the head of the family told him to look after the third young miss, Yuan Tianyi. He didn't want to let the third young miss fall into the hands of eldest young master on the first day. Otherwise, this would probably be the last time the third young miss appeared in the cultivation hall. No, according to what the third young miss said today, if she fell into the hands of eldest young master, it would probably be the last time she saw the sun. Chapter 1454. The teacher thought about it and decided that he couldn't follow the eldest young master's wishes this time. If the family head were to blame him, he wouldn't be able to say anything. With that in mind, he turned around and shouted at Gu Xingyin, "Did the third young miss not hear what I said? You don't even want to listen to your teacher's words. Do you not want to stay in this cultivation hall?" In his mind, the Yuan estate's cultivation hall was a sacred place in the hearts of all the Yuan family disciples. If he used this to threaten Gu Xingyin, she would definitely obediently submit. However, what the teacher didn't expect was that the third young miss, Yuan Tianyi, only lazily glanced at him and actually nodded. After seeing such a big show today, I really don't have any intention of staying in this cultivation hall. The teacher suspected that there was something wrong with his ears. What did she just say? He subconsciously glanced to his side and discovered that most of the Yuan family disciples had the same expression as him, as if they had seen a ghost. Strangely, his heart relaxed a lot. This time, the teacher was really angry. He had dedicated his entire life to the Yuan family's cultivation hall and regarded this place as more important than himself. He simply couldn't tolerate Gu Xingyi's actions of not taking his blood, sweat, and tears seriously. Moreover, this third young miss wasn't some peerless genius at the peak of the world. She was just a piece of trash that even they would look down on in their cultivation hall. What right did such a person have to look down on them? The teacher's expression was extremely unsightly. He coldly glanced at Gu Xingyi. This old man will report the third young miss's words to the family head. I hope that the third young miss can still be so unyielding in front of the family head in a while. Gu Xingyi nodded. Since that's the case, I'll take my leave first. She actually walked towards the door without any reluctance. Did I say that you can leave? A gloomy and cold voice came from behind Gu Xingyi. At the same time, Yuan Tianqi's eyes flashed with a fierce glint. Above his head, the image of an enormous dragon condensed from ice and frost appeared. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it clawed at Gu Xingyi. From the looks of it, he wasn't holding back. If Gu Xingyi had really been caught, his head would have been crushed by the claw. Yuan Tianheng's pupils shrank when he saw this scene. He knew that he couldn't save them in time, so he couldn't help but look at his teacher. What shocked him was that Mr. was looking at him coldly at this moment, without any intention of helping him. He also didn't want to leave Yuan Tianyi alive. Yuan Tianheng's heart trembled as he looked at Gu Xingyi. Suddenly, Gu Xingyi heard the commotion and turned his head around slowly. The shadow of the giant dragon appeared above her head in an instant. However, at this moment, a green figure suddenly appeared behind her. It was a very ethereal figure in a green robe. Upon closer inspection, he seemed to be holding a huge scepter in his hand. The shadow seemed to be offended as he let out a cold snort. A green light shot out from the scepter in his hand and was aimed at the frost dragon that was about to touch Gu Xingyi. The giant dragon was hit by the green light and stagnated in the air for a second. Then, its entire body shot out and turned into a gorgeous ice mist in the air, disappearing without a trace. Gu Xingyi looked at the silent Yuan Tianqi with a faint smile. Remember, don't call me trash every time you open your mouth. Be careful, you'll be slapped in the face. When she turned around again, the way the people looked at her had completely changed. How could someone who could easily block the eldest young master's attack be trash? Moreover, she was only 10 years old. Chapter 1455. Yuan Tianqi glared at Gu Xingyi. Upon closer inspection, the depths of his eyes seemed to be quietly entwined with crimson streaks of blood. If there was someone who understood him here, they would definitely realize that he was really angry. There were very few people who could infuriate young Master Yuan and survive in this world. Yuan Tianqi saw that Gu Xingyi didn't even turn her head to look at the people in the hall, including himself. He was so angry that he started to laugh. Suddenly, ice and snow appeared around him, filling the entire cultivation hall. Gu Xingyi stopped in her tracks. She turned around, and there was no smile on her face. Yuan Tianqi, do you want to die? The disciples of the Yuan family in the cultivation hall were really frightened today. That third miss, who was known throughout the family as a waste, actually dared to provoke the eldest young master in front of everyone, and even showed her exceptional talent and strength. This was already hard to believe, but this third miss was even more arrogant than the eldest young master. Just listen to what she said. Although everyone admitted that the third miss, who was only 10 years old, was really powerful, the eldest young master Yuan Tianqi had been in everyone's hearts for a long time. No one thought that Gu Xingyi could win against Yuan Tianqi. She was still too young and couldn't keep her cool. Many people thought so in their hearts. Yuan Qin, on the other hand, was looking at Gu Xingyin with schadenfreude. When Gu Xingyin showed that she could fight against Yuan Tianqin, Yuan Qin was shocked. All of this seemed to have subverted her understanding, that Yuan Tianyi, who had always been a waste under her, was actually so powerful. After the shock, she was terrified. Only she knew how many excessive things she had done to Yuan Tianyi. No. Yuan Tianyi also knew. It was because of this that Yuan Qin was afraid. It didn't matter if Yuan Tianyi was really a waste or just biding her time. Now that she had shown her talent and strength, the family would definitely focus on training her. As for herself, she was the one who had severely offended Yuan Tianyi. Putting herself in Yuan Qin's shoes, she didn't think that Yuan Tianyi would let her go. Therefore, when Gu Xingyin recklessly provoked Yuan Tianqin, no one was happier than Yuan Qin. She couldn't wait for Yuan Tianyi to be a bit more arrogant, completely provoking the anger of the eldest young master, making the eldest young master confront her. It would be best if eldest young master could cripple this person. With eldest young master's talent, even if Yuan Tianyi was crippled, nothing would happen to him, right? Yuan Qin was silently looking forward to it. Hearing Gu Xingyin's words, Yuan Tianqin's heart was filled with killing intent. He looked down at Gu Xingyin from above and said coldly, "If you kneel down and beg me to let you go now, I can consider it." Chi. Gu Xingyin sneered, "Where does your confidence come from? Just because you've eaten a few more years than me?" After saying this, her expression suddenly changed, and she looked at Yuan Tianqin strangely. At the same time, the space in front of Gu Xingyin seemed to be slightly distorted, and a red figure suddenly appeared beside her. As soon as that person appeared, the entire cultivation hall instantly became silent. Except for a small number of people who were absent-minded because of his charm, most of the Yuan family's disciples were directly unable to speak under that terrifying pressure. In fact, it was already very difficult for them to support themselves and stand. Lin Yuan looked straight at Yuan Tianqin. "What you just said, say it again." Chapter 1456. Every time he said a word, the pressure that fell on Yuan Tianqin's body became even heavier. By the time he finished asking, bean-sized beads of sweat had already appeared on Yuan Tianqin's forehead. It was obvious that he was under a lot of pressure at the moment. The teacher next to him looked at the man in red who suddenly appeared in the Yuan family's cultivation hall. He forcibly suppressed the shock in his heart and asked, "Who are you? Why did you appear in my Yuan family's cultivation hall?" Lin Yuan didn't even look at him. He just said indifferently, "Shut up." The teacher was furious. He was about to say something, but he was shocked to find that he couldn't open his mouth. He widened his eyes and stared at Lin Yuan in horror. Who the hell is this person? Lin Yuan just looked down at Yuan Tianqin in front of him with a pale face and pursed lips. There was no warmth in his cold eyes. "Speak." Yuan Tianqin had been bitterly resisting. He gritted his teeth and didn't speak, but the moment Lin Yuan said that word, his mouth opened uncontrollably. He looked a little frightened when he found that he couldn't control himself at all. He said word by word, "If now, you kneel down and beg me to let you go, I can still consider it." Yuan Tianqin had never felt such deep despair before. From the moment he was born, he was the pride of the heavens. After his talent was tested, he was flattered by the entire Yuan family and cultivated with the best resources. He never knew what it felt like to be powerless, and he had never felt the feeling of being humiliated like an ant. This man. Yuan Tianqin clenched his teeth. The tip of his tongue even tasted the taste of blood. One day, he would return all the humiliation he had suffered today. And Yuan Tianyi, that bitch, he would make them die a horrible death. However, before he could finish thinking about the future, he heard the man beside him say indifferently, "Kneel down." Yuan Tianqin didn't have time to react. His legs involuntarily knelt on the ground. There was a loud bang. Yuan Tianqin felt that this time, it wasn't just his legs that knelt down, but also his self-esteem. The rest of the Yuan family's children were completely stunned. They never thought that things would develop to this point. They looked at Yuan Tianqin, who was usually like a god, who had no power to resist in front of this man. He was like an ant that could be trampled upon by others. So the peerless genius of the Yuan clan was still such an insignificant existence in the eyes of a true expert. Gu Xingyin was the only one who was in a normal mood. She clearly told Lin Yuan not to come out unless it was a critical moment, but from the looks of it, this man still couldn't hold it in. Although the other party didn't listen to her, it didn't affect Gu Xingyin's good mood. Today, she had come here to slap their faces. Lin Yuan's method was undoubtedly even more thorough than hers. Moreover, it was obvious that the other party was here to open her eyes. The feeling of hugging a golden finger, oh no, a golden thigh and waiting for death, was not bad. She thought with a smile. Just as she was distracted, Lin Yuan spoke again. If you apologize to me now and kowtow 3 times, I will consider sparing your life. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but smile. This man was really, of course, Yuan Tianqin wouldn't be willing. How could a person like him, who had been successful all his life, tolerate himself doing such a shameless thing? But this wasn't something he was willing to do. Chapter 1457. Because, just after Lin Yuan said those words, Yuan Tianqin had already noticed that there seemed to be a force controlling his body in the dark. Even though he clenched his teeth and the tip of his tongue was bleeding, he still said those words. Yuan Tianyi, I apologize to you today. Yuan Tianqin closed his eyes in pain. He even felt that if he had a choice at this moment, he would rather bang his head on the ground and die than say such humiliating words in front of so many people. But he had no choice. In Lin Yuan's words, it would be, you want to die? No problem, after kowtowing and apologizing, you can die as you please. He just stood there quietly and watched Yuan Tianqin apologize and kowtow. The moment his forehead touched the ground, the hatred in Yuan Tianqin's heart reached its peak. He swore. One day, he would send this man and woman to the Yellow Springs. Yuan Qin, who was watching from the side, was completely pale. At this time, when she looked at Lin Yuan again, she no longer felt that his face was incomparably magnificent. This man was simply a demon. Her body couldn't help but tremble. This man didn't even put Yuan Tianqin, the Yuan family's most powerful genius, in his eyes. Why would he care about her? Right now, she could only try her best to hide behind someone else and pray that the man didn't notice her. Lin Yuan, you've gone too far. A voice that contained anger sounded in the cultivation hall. At the same time, the figure of an old man appeared in front of Lin Yuan. It was the Yuan family's old ancestor. When he appeared, Yuan Tianqin had just finished kowtowing 3 times. As soon as the old man appeared, Yuan Tianqin felt the shackles on his body disappear. He immediately stood up. Old ancestor. Seeing the old man, Yuan Tianqin's eyes lit up and he shouted. As the most talented heir of the Yuan family's younger generation, Yuan Tianqin had naturally seen the old ancestor before. When the others heard his call, they all looked at the old man with excited eyes. The Yuan family's old ancestor. That was a legendary figure. It was said that even the emperor of the Dragon Phoenix Empire had to respectfully bow to him as a junior. Yuan Tianqin's heart relaxed, and the resentment that he had been suppressing uncontrollably emerged. He pointed at Lin Yuan. Forefather, it was this person and Yuan Tianyi behind him who forced me to be humiliated and even wanted my life. With the patriarch by his side, he instantly gained confidence. The old ancestor's expression wasn't good either. When he sensed the aura of the Abyss Lord, he came over just in time to see his most favored junior kowtowing to Yuan Tianyi. Although ancient summoners were indeed powerful, in terms of closeness, Yuan Tianyi's position in his heart was obviously not as high as Yuan Tianqin, whom he had been paying attention to for more than 10 years. The Abyssal Lord was powerful, but doing things like this was clearly trampling on the Yuan family's face. The Yuan family patriarch looked at Lin Yuan with an unpleasant expression, but his tone was still considered polite. Lin Yuan Jun, you've disturbed my Yuan family's cultivation hall with such fanfare. Can you tell this old man what you mean by this? As soon as he spoke, Lin Yuan knew that he was on Yuan Tianqin's side. He didn't even ask what had happened. Thinking of this, he looked at Gu Xingyin with some heartache. Although he knew that Tianyi didn't have a good life in the Yuan family, he still felt angry when he saw her being treated like this with his own eyes. Chapter 1458. Since he was angry, Lin Yuan naturally wouldn't hold it in. He turned to look at the Yuan family patriarch. His gaze actually made the Yuan family patriarch feel a trace of pressure. The Yuan family patriarch's heart trembled. He had heard of the Nine Hells Purgatory's ruler, but had never fought him. Previously, he had always thought that even if there was a gap between them, it wouldn't be too big. He didn't expect that a single gaze from him would make him feel threatened. Then, he heard Lin Yuan's cold voice. Yuan family patriarch, I was polite to you earlier only because Tianyi is a member of the Yuan family. If not for that, do you think someone like you would be worthy of my courtesy? These words were already quite impolite. However, the Yuan family patriarch didn't immediately retort. This was because the moment Lin Yuan spoke, the Yuan family's patriarch sensed that an aura had locked onto him from the unseen world the moment Lin Yuan spoke. At his level, he had a certain degree of sensitivity to life and death. He could roughly estimate that if he were to become enemies with this person in front of him, he would be the one to fall in the end. As for the Yuan family disciples at the side, they were all stunned. In their eyes, the Yuan family patriarch was an existence akin to a god. With him around, no one dared to shake the Yuan family in the slightest. But now, there was actually someone who dared to say such arrogant words in front of the Yuan family patriarch. Did this man not know the immensity of heaven and earth, or was he strong enough to not fear the entire Yuan family? Soon, they found out the answer. Because the omnipotent patriarch in their eyes didn't say anything in the face of such arrogant provocation. The patriarch lowered his head. Yuan Tianqin felt as if a bucket of cold water had been poured into his heart. It was as if it was only at this moment that he truly realized what kind of existence he had provoked. An expert that even his own patriarch had to retreat from. The Yuan family patriarch felt that it was a bit embarrassing to act like this in front of a junior, but at his level, he wouldn't be disturbed by such emotions. He said in a low voice, although Lin Yuan is strong, you should still be reasonable, right? Reasonable? It was only when one's martial strength was inferior that the weaker side needed to be reasonable. This was the first time the Yuan family patriarch, who had been strong all his life, said such words. Lin Yuan's gaze paused. Reasonable? He actually nodded his head in a carefree manner. It's fine to be reasonable. This junior of your family scolded my contractor as trash and wanted Tianyi to kneel and beg for mercy. He even wanted her life. Although his tone was calm, each sentence was colder than the last. The Yuan family's old ancestor had only just found out about this matter. Just by thinking about it and connecting it to Yuan Tianqin's temperament, he could roughly understand what had happened. At this time, Lin Yuan suddenly sneered, I've lived for 10,000 years. This is the first time I've seen someone step on my face like this. Tell me. He looked at the patriarch of the Yuan family and asked, does such a person deserve to die? The Yuan family's old ancestor's heart immediately calmed down. After contracting a magical beast and a summoner had a low-level contract, they would become one entity. Insulting one of them was equivalent to insulting both of them. Tianqin actually said such a thing? No wonder Lord Lin Yuan was so angry. If it was him, and he was treated like this by a junior, he would have been unable to endure it long ago. Even so, Yuan Tianqin was his most promising successor, the future hope of the Yuan family. He couldn't watch anything happen to him. Chapter 1459. The Yuan family's elder immediately turned his head and scolded Yuan Tianqin, Jr., you don't know any better. Why aren't you apologizing to Lord Abyss? Yuan Tianqin was dumbfounded. If he didn't hear wrong, the man in red with an imposing aura just now said that Yuan Tianyi was his contractor. This person wasn't human, but a demonic beast? A demonic beast that could cultivate into a human form. His heart trembled violently because of this thought. But soon, his panic turned into unwillingness. How could a trash like Yuan Tianyi contract with such a powerful demonic beast? No wonder she changed so much. Yuan Tianqin couldn't help but think that if he could also have such a powerful demonic beast, would today's matter be completely different? He didn't think that he, a person with a 9th-level summoner talent, could have the ability to summon a demonic beast like Lord Abyss. Even if he did summon a demonic beast like Lord Abyss, it wouldn't ask for anything from a human, and it wouldn't agree to contract with a human. No matter what he thought, on the surface, Yuan Tianqin bowed to Lord Abyss willingly this time and apologized again. But Lord Abyss didn't have any reaction. At this time, if he wanted to give the Yuan family's elder face, he should say a few words and let this matter pass. But Lord Abyss didn't, which meant this matter wasn't over yet. The Yuan family's elder felt a surge of anger in his heart, but he suppressed it. He couldn't be angry, it was useless, he wasn't Lord Abyss's opponent. Yuan Tianqin, on the other hand, was anxious, since he saw the elder's attitude towards this person, he had put away his arrogance and pride. This man wasn't someone he could afford to offend. Seeing that Lord Abyss didn't respond, the Yuan family's elder took a deep breath and said, "Lord Abyss, what else are you dissatisfied with?" Lord Abyss's gaze fell on Gu Xingyin, who was standing on the side and watching the show, and said, "What? Apologize to me? Don't you know who you offended?" He didn't need to think to know that this family lowered their heads only because he was here. If he wasn't here today, who knew how much Tianyi would have suffered? Lord Abyss's heart was filled with anger. If he didn't vent this anger, he wouldn't be happy. The Yuan family's patriarch looked at Gu Xingyin, who was standing at the side. His expression was very amiable as he said, "Little Tianyi, you see, your brother Tianqin is young and impetuous, so it's inevitable that he would speak a little rashly. After all, you're also a member of the Yuan family. We're all family. Shouldn't we be more lenient whenever possible?" He felt that as a saint-level expert in Yuan Tianyi's elder, this 10-year-old girl should at least give him some face. However, Gu Xingyin used the truth to tell him that he was thinking too much. When Gu Xingyin heard the Yuan family patriarch's words, she widened her eyes and stared at him. He looked as innocent as he could be, but the words he said made the Yuan family's old ancestor and Yuan Tianqin's faces darken. "That's right. You're young and impetuous. So when you open your mouth, you want me to kneel down. When you close your mouth, you want my life." When Lin Yuan heard this, he chuckled. "If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If people offend me, I won't let them off easily." Tian Yi's temperament was indeed to his liking. The Yuan family's old ancestor didn't expect this junior to not give him any face. Chapter 1460. He said in a heavy tone, "Little girl, it's better to leave some leeway. After all, you're also a member of the Yuan family." He was warning her. Gu Xingyin sneered. "Yuan family? If it weren't for Lin Yuan, I'm afraid I wouldn't be in this world anymore." She looked at Lin Yuan, and he nodded. The onlookers didn't know what they were talking about. Gu Xingyin turned around. "Since I've been raised by the Yuan family for 10 years, I'll take Yuan Tianqin's life this time to repay the Yuan family's kindness. What do you think?" She was going to shed all pretense of cordiality with the Yuan family. The Yuan family ancestor felt his heart ache when he heard this. He knew what kind of terrifying talent this little girl had. If she stayed in the Yuan family, with Tianqin, he was confident that the Yuan family would be able to suppress the other families and become the strongest family in the Dragon Phoenix Empire. However, after thinking about it, he realized that even if he left Yuan Tianyi in the Yuan family, she would still be at odds with the Yuan family. He might as well hold on to Tianqin and have a chance to take revenge in the future. He nodded with a helpless expression. "Tianyi, you're still a descendant of the Yuan family. I didn't expect you to be like this, without any attachment to the Yuan family." Gu Xingyin sneered. "Everyone knows what the truth is like. There's no need to act like this. Even if the ancestor doesn't find it tiring, it hurts my eyes." With Lin Yuan as her backer, Gu Xingyin wasn't afraid of offending the Yuan family ancestor at all. Moreover, she had already thoroughly offended him. Both sides swore an oath. Gu Xingyin breathed a sigh of relief when she said that she was no longer a member of the Yuan family. This world attached great importance to family clans. If she did anything in the future, the Yuan family would always tie her hands and feet. She might as well take this opportunity to make a clean break. On the other hand, the Yuan family's old ancestor's face was dark as he looked at her relieved expression. His heart was filled with killing intent. Today, he had felt the humiliation he had never felt before in his life. In the end, all of this was caused by this Yuan family junior in front of him. He would remember it bit by bit and find an opportunity to return it. At this moment, he didn't even want to look at the two of them. He only said in a deep voice, "Since the two of you don't like my Yuan family, then please." However, Lin Yuan did not move. He said, "There's no hurry. There are still 2 things I haven't done yet." Hearing Zhang Xian's tone, the Yuan clan's patriarch panicked. By the time he reacted, it was already too late. 2 blood-curdling screams came from the Yuan family disciple beside him. The Yuan family's old ancestor immediately looked at Yuan Tianqin, who was beside him. He saw blood flowing out from the corner of Yuan Tianqin's mouth. Yuan Tianqin was looking at him with eyes full of hatred and unwillingness. His tongue had just been cut off by someone. The Yuan family patriarch suddenly looked at Lin Yuan. "Why didn't you keep your word?" Lin Yuan said calmly, "You don't keep your word? I only promised to spare his dog life. What's the point of keeping this tongue that doesn't know how to speak?" As for the other one, his tone was full of disgust. "You keep calling people trash. Have a taste of what it's like to be trash who can't cultivate." The other one he was talking about was Yuan Qin. Yuan Qin was currently lying on the ground with a pale face. Just now, she suddenly felt as if an invisible hand had violently pulled something out of her body. Chapter 1461. She didn't react at first, but now she knew. That terrifying man had actually crippled her. Yuan Qin forgot to be afraid this time. She didn't have any strength, so she could only look at Lin Yuan with resentful eyes, wishing she could drink his blood. But how could Lin Yuan be afraid of her? He said faintly, "If you keep looking, don't even think about keeping your eyes." Yuan Qin didn't lose her mind. She knew that this man would definitely do what he said. She could only lower her head in resentment. She hated it. After the intense resentment, there was despair. What did she rely on to come to the main family from the side branch? He relied on his talent. But now, she had become like this. After staying in the main family for a few years, Yuan Qin clearly knew how ruthless this family was. Once she was of no use to the family, she, who came from the side branch, would definitely go back to where she came from. Yuan Qin had a flamboyant personality. When she returned home in the past, she showed off to her brothers and sisters who were not as talented as her and offended many people. She used to think that she would be like this for the rest of her life. Who would have thought that she would encounter such a thing? Thinking about it, she knew what she would face if she was sent back like this. For a moment, Yuan Qin felt that she might as well die and be done with it. But she didn't have the courage. After a while, Yuan Qin raised her head, but sadly found that not many people cared about her. Even the old ancestor only had eyes for the eldest young master who had his tongue cut off. Yuan Qin laughed at herself. Yes, she was just one of the many disciples of the Yuan family. It didn't matter if there was one more or one less. How could she compare to the eldest young master? She saw that the old ancestor was angry because of the eldest young master and seemed to be arguing with the other side. But the man in red on the opposite side had always been indifferent, firmly protecting Yuan Tianyi behind him. In the end, the old ancestor was helpless. Under the gaze of so many Yuan family disciples, Lin Yuan took Yuan Tianyi's hand and left the Yuan family. The two didn't even pack their things. However, Yuan Tianyi really didn't have anything to pack. Both of them knew what kind of life he used to live in the Yuan family. "You were really," Lin Yuan tilted his head. Gu Xingyin smiled. "Especially handsome." Lin Yuan smiled when he heard this. "Where do you want to go?" Gu Xingyin shook her head and thought for a moment. Let's go to your territory and have a look. In the very beginning of the story, Yuan Tianyi, who had become a winner in life, had no place to conquer. Lin Yuan was cold for a moment, then he bent his eyes. All right. The two of them spent 2 days to arrive at the legendary Nine Hells Purgatory, the place where humans could enter but never leave. After that, she lived there for 10 years. In 10 years, the entire magical beast continent was in turmoil, and geniuses emerged in large numbers. However, no one knew that a girl with the bloodline of an ancient summoner was quietly growing. Lin Yuan was sitting on a cliff. Colorful flowers bloomed on both sides of the cliff. When the wind blew, one could smell the greasy fragrance of the flowers. Further away, one could see many green trees. It was actually a very lively valley. No one had ever imagined that the legendary Nine Hells Purgatory would look like this. However, if you look down from the cliff from the edge of the cliff, you will know that this is still Nine Hells Purgatory. Because at the bottom of this unfathomably deep cliff, there was no misty cloud, but scarlet flames. Chapter 1462. That flame was not an ordinary flame, but the most tyrannical and powerful 9 underworld hellfire in the entire 9 underworld purgatory. No matter if it was a human or any other creature, they would die upon contact with it, and not even their bones would remain, turning into ashes. From the beginning to the end, there was only one exception, the ruler of the 9 underworld purgatory who was born from the 9 underworld hellfire, Lin Yuan. The 9 underworld hellfire that others avoided was not only not terrifying to Lin Yuan, but was instead very intimate. Lin Yuan. A clear voice came from behind him. Lin Yuan did not turn his head, but his face revealed a trace of a smile. He knew who had come. He turned around and saw that girl wearing a sky-blue dress riding on a silver-white fur magic beast, coming towards him. That magic beast had silver-white fur, and when it ran, it was like moonlight falling on her body. She had gentle big blue eyes, and a white jade-like horn standing on top of her head, looking very beautiful. This very gentle-looking magic beast was precisely the one that Gu Xingyin encountered after coming to the 9 underworld purgatory. It was also Yuan Tianyi's contracted magic beast in the very beginning of the storyline, Moonlight Unicorn. In the Unicorn clan, as long as their bloodline was pure, almost all of them surpassed the 9th rank magic beast and entered the holy beast level. And the Moonlight Unicorn was considered a king-level existence among the unicorns, famous because of its extremely unique fur that flowed down like the cold moonlight. However, Gu Xingyin's contracted magic beast was Lin Yuan, and this Moonlight Unicorn was only one of her many summoned magic beasts. When it came to Gu Xingyin, the advantage of an ancient summoner was truly reflected. After experiencing so many worlds, Gu Xingyin's soul power could be described as endless. And the number of magic beasts that an ancient summoner could summon was completely dependent on how strong her soul power was. Even Lin Yuan, after feeling Gu Xingyin's soul, couldn't help but exclaim, this kind of bloodline, in addition to the soul power that was like the blessing of the gods. As a contractor, he was simply like the darling of the heavenly Tao. As the protagonist, wasn't he the darling of the heavenly Tao? Not to mention, Gu Xingyin had such a huge cheat on her. The Moonlight Unicorn stopped when it was about 30 meters away from the waterside abyss. She bent her knees slightly and bent her body so that Gu Xingyin could get down more easily. Gu Xingyin jumped down from her back and reached out to touch her head. Ah Yao, thank you. The Moonlight Unicorn gently rubbed against her hand before leaving. Gu Xingyin walked towards the people at the edge of the cliff. Lin Yuan didn't like to be disturbed, so these magical beasts were very tactful and spontaneously stopped when they were still a long time away from him. From the beginning to the end, the only one who could get close to him without fear of being rejected was Gu Xingyin. Are you going out? The person who asked was Lin Yuan. Gu Xingyin nodded. How can the Zhen family get first place in the summoner conference that is held once every 20 years? She had heard that the peerless genius of the Zhen family was the most promising person to get first place. Wasn't the peerless genius of the Zhen family Yuan Tianqin? Losing his tongue didn't affect his cultivation. On the contrary, it was said that his cultivation speed had increased a lot in the past 10 years. Gu Xingyin was more concerned about another news. Chapter 1463. Because the eldest young master of the Yuan family couldn't speak, he always had a girl by his side. He didn't know what kind of method she used, but the girl was able to perceive what the eldest young master wanted to say at the first moment and express it. For this point, even if the girl couldn't cultivate, she was still the number one person beside Yuan Tianqin. This girl was Yuan Qin. Gu Xingyin didn't know how Yuan Qin did it. She only knew that she absolutely couldn't let the combination of Yuan Qin and Yuan Tianqin take first place. When she told Lin Yuan her thoughts, Lin Yuan was still very disapproving. The two who offended you back then? If you really don't like them, I'll just take their lives. Gu Xingyin shook his head. For Yuan Qin and Yuan Tianqin, it would be more unbearable for them to be easily defeated by a person they had always looked down on and let them know that they were worse than trash, than asking them to die. Gu Xingyin had plenty of time to slowly waste time with them. She said her thoughts. Even if Lin Yuan didn't necessarily agree, he wouldn't refute her. Gu Xingyin thought for a moment. It seemed that since she came to this world, Lin Yuan had never objected to any of her thoughts. He always indulged her. Aren't you afraid that I will be raised to have a lawless temperament? Gu Xingyin said. Lin Yuan looked at her with a smile. So what if you're lawless? With me here, would there be anyone on this continent who doesn't have eyes and provokes you? Gu Xingyin suddenly looked at him and said, no matter what I want, will you agree and not refuse? Her tone seemed a little serious. Lin Yuan looked at her for a second, not knowing what she was thinking. However, after thinking carefully for a moment, he still nodded. As long as I have it, as long as I can give it. After he finished speaking, he felt a blur in front of his eyes, and a pair of slightly cold hands had already wrapped around his neck. Lin Yuan didn't feel anything wrong. This kind of intimacy was just a common occurrence for the two of them. But today seemed a little different. After Gu Xingyin wrapped her arms around his neck, her whole body leaned towards him. Their foreheads touched, and they could hear each other's breathing. Gu Xingyin looked into Lin Yuan's eyes. Lin Yuan's pupils looked no different from an ordinary person's, but at such a close distance, she could see that his pupils were not the same black as an ordinary person's, but were dyed with a faint layer of dark red. Very beautiful. Gu Xingyin thought. Lin Yuan's expression didn't change. He just focused on Gu Xingyin, as if he was thinking about what she was going to do. Gu Xingyin smiled sweetly. You said that no matter what I want, as long as you can give it to me, you will give it to me, right? Lin Yuan's voice seemed to carry a trace of disorder. However, he still nodded. It is as you have heard. Gu Xingyin blinked. What if I want you? Silence. A wind blew from the bottom of the cliff, carrying a trace of the unique coldness of the 9 underworlds' fire. Lin Yuan did not speak. Gu Xingyin was not in a hurry, and looked at him patiently. Then, she felt her waist tighten, and a pair of strong arms wrapped around her waist. A hoarse voice sounded in her ear, if you want it. Gu Xingyin burst out laughing. She stepped back a little and received a somewhat dissatisfied look from Lin Yuan. Then tell me, is it you who wants it, or I want it? Chapter 1464. Lin Yuan looked at Gu Xingyin with a complacent smile, as if he had already guessed something. He couldn't help but laugh as well. Holding her tightly in his arms, he sighed, I've been waiting for you for a long time, and I've finally heard your words. Gu Xingyin leaned against his chest and could clearly hear his powerful and rapid heartbeat. It was for her. She had some bad thoughts and said, I've been waiting for a long time. How old was I at that time? I didn't expect you to be such a person. Hearing the hidden laughter in her words, Lin Yuan didn't expose her. He replied very seriously, in fact, Tianyi, from the night you summoned me 10 years ago, you were destined to only belong to me in this life. His heart was very small, and could only accommodate one person. Moreover, that person could only belong to her. From Gu Xingyin's summoned magical beasts, it could be seen that they were all docile and cute female beasts, and there wasn't even a single male beast. Moreover, even if it was a female beast, he wouldn't allow Gu Xingyin to be too close to them. This man was even jealous of magical beasts. When Gu Xingyin heard his swear-like words, she was stunned for a moment, and then the smile on her face disappeared. She looked at Lin Yuan seriously and said, "What a coincidence. Actually, when I first saw you 10 years ago, I felt that such a beautiful and powerful man must belong to me." Lin Yuan's eyes trembled for a moment, and the corners of his lips couldn't help but curl up. "Well, when your matters are over, let's conclude a companion contract, right?" A companion contract. With the soul as an oath, the two people who became companions would share everything about their companions, including their lifespan, cultivation, status. This kind of ancient contract had long been lost in the current magical beast continent. Unexpectedly, this man still remembered it. Gu Xingyin looked at the smile on his face and pretended not to hear the disorderly heartbeat in his ears. "All right." She thought for a moment and suddenly remembered something. So she said to Lin Yuan, "Close your eyes." Lin Yuan didn't quite understand what she was going to do, but he still obediently closed his eyes. Gu Xingyin stretched out her right hand. A bright green light shone from her hand, and then, "Open your eyes." Lin Yuan opened his eyes but was stunned. A sky full of red petals fell down, fluttering about as if there was no end, drowning the two of them in this wave of fire. In front of him was a bouquet of red flowers in full bloom. This flower, Lin Yuan suddenly remembered that 10 years ago, Tian Yi seemed to have given him a similar flower. It seemed to be called Rose. Gu Xingyin handed the flower to him and said with a smile, "In a faraway place, people there use this kind of red rose to symbolize warm and beautiful love. This kind of flower is also used during courtship. I'm giving him to you now, Lin Yuan. 99 red roses symbolize everlasting love." She smiled like a flower. "Are you willing to accept it?" Lin Yuan stretched out his hand and embraced Gu Xingyin into his arms with the flower. The rain of flowers still didn't stop, and soon the ground was covered with a thick layer of red petals. The two people, one in red and one in blue, quietly embraced each other in this fiery world. It seemed to be as Gu Xingyin said, eternal and unchanging. Chapter 1465. After some time, Gu Xingyin and Lin Yuan left the Nine Hells Purgatory and began to set foot on the magical beast continent that they hadn't been to for 10 years. The Summoner Conference had been going on for a long time. Those summoners without any background naturally needed to start from the lowest level of competition and go up one round at a time. However, it was different for the summoners from the big families and forces. They could directly skip the beginning of the competition and directly enter the last few rounds of the assessment. Regarding this, whether it was those summoners without background or those with background, they had no objections. The reason was that from the beginning of the competition, the number of people who advanced in each round was determined. Those civilian summoners had a lot less innate advantages compared to those summoners with the support of big families' resources. And if there were no summoners from big families participating, the number of people who advanced could also be increased. And for those summoners with powerful backgrounds, the early rounds of the competition weren't difficult. It was nothing more than a waste of time to increase their exposure. So everyone tacitly agreed with this rule. Only a small number of people might have different ideas. For example, this time, the most popular winner was the eldest son of the Yuan family, Yuan Tianqin. This person started from the first round of the preliminary test and went up one round at a time. What he wanted was not only first place, but also fame throughout the continent. So he had to participate in every round. Not only did he have to participate, but he had to win. Not only did he have to win, but he had to win beautifully. He had to win shock. But Yuan Tianqin's so-called shock method was a bit excessive. Every summoner who fought against Yuan Tianqin was almost beaten half to death. None of the summoners who were defeated by him came out unscathed. The lighter ones vomited blood, the heavier ones were even crippled on the spot, and even their summoned beasts were bitten to death by Yuan Tianqin's purple-winged thunder dragon. So along with Yuan Tianqin's reputation as a genius, there was also his tyranny, but even so, there were still countless young summoners who worshipped this man and even set him as their goal. As for the summoners you mentioned who were defeated and crippled by his hands, their skills were inferior, who could they blame? When Gu Xingyin sat in the tea house and heard such remarks, she simply laughed in her heart. Just because you're strong and you've won, you can easily destroy the decades of hard work of others? Those people who said such things had never faced Yuan Tianqin before, right? Gu Xingyin recalled the cold and merciless gaze of that young man 10 years ago, and her heart trembled. Yuan Tianqin was still the same. But since that was the case, Gu Xingyin smiled. She was best at giving others a taste of their own medicine. After putting the money on the table, Gu Xingyin got up and walked out. Soon, she arrived at the competition venue of the Summoner Conference. Of course, it was the venue for the finals. Gu Xingyin looked at the jade slip in her hand. There was a bright red number, 27, on it. Of course, she was the kind with a background. When the contestants from Nine Hells Purgatory, Lin Yuan personally went to the organizer to ask for a spot, the expressions of those old fellows became more and more interesting. Even someone from Nine Hells Purgatory came, and it was Lin Yuan who personally came to ask for a spot. An old man in a white robe looked a little serious with a hint of expectation. I'm afraid that the Summoner Conference this time will be more exciting than we imagined. Lin Li exclaimed. 8:00 clock ended. Look at my sincere little eyes. Please vote, 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 vote. I'll dance in circles for you to see good night. Chapter 1466. There wasn't much difference between the rules of the finals and the preliminaries. It was still a one-on-one competition. The winner would advance to the next round. If there was a difference, it was probably that the strength of the opponents increased with each round. Gu Xingyin attracted a lot of attention when she first went on stage. After all, the prefix of her name was Nine Hells Purgatory. Everyone had heard of Nine Hells Purgatory, but they had never heard of a summoner appearing there, so everyone was very curious. However, Gu Xingyin's performance had always been very normal. She had only summoned a level 9 magical beast, Flaming Skylark. Although it was also very powerful, it was still somewhat lacking compared to Yuan Tianqin and the others' amazing strength. Many people looked at Gu Xingyin and shook their heads, saying that this contestant from Nine Hells Purgatory was still too young compared to the others. In other words, they didn't think highly of her. However, Gu Xingyin didn't care. She naturally had her reasons for doing so. Yuan Tianqin also paid attention to Gu Xingyin. When he heard that the other party was from Nine Hells Purgatory, his expression instantly turned cold. The hatred of having his tongue cut off 10 years ago was still in his heart. As long as there was a chance, he would never let go of a chance to take revenge. Yuan Tianqin naturally also hated in her heart. Yuan Tianqin only lost a tongue, but she, her entire person, had lost the rules to become a summoner. No one knew how much effort she had put in to be able to stay in the Yuan family, and no one knew how much effort she had put in to stay by Yuan Tianqin's side and become his most trusted subordinate. But that wasn't important anymore. She stayed by Yuan Tianqin's side, and the two of them had the same goal, to take revenge one day. To take revenge on the ruler of Nine Hells Purgatory, the Lord of the Abyss, and Yuan Tianyi who had caused them to become like this. However, the funny thing was that the two of them were gnashing their teeth in hatred, but when they saw Gu Xingyin, they didn't recognize her. Originally, Yuan Tianyi didn't have a good life in the Yuan family. When she was 10 years old, she was the same as other children when they were 7 or 8 years old. Skinny, small, pale, and her delicate face was lowered all year round. She didn't attract any attention. However, things were different in Nine Hells Purgatory. Lin Yuan almost treated Gu Xingyin as a treasure in the palm of his hand. In the vast Nine Hells Purgatory, there were countless treasures. Those heavenly and earthly treasures with mild medicinal properties that outsiders coveted were all given to Gu Xingyin as snacks by Lin Yuan. After 10 years, Gu Xingyin and Yuan Tianyi as a child, whether in appearance or temperament, were like two different people. She also used a fake name to participate in the competition, Gu Yuan. It would be strange if those two could still recognize her. However, even if he didn't recognize that Gu Xingyin was Yuan Tianyi, who they had hated for 10 years, Yuan Tianqin didn't plan to let her go when he heard that she was from Nine Hells Purgatory. Since he couldn't take revenge on Yuan Tianyi and the Lord of the Abyss, he could vent his anger on those who were related to them. Wasn't he afraid of being held accountable for the competition? When he was nervous, he didn't know how to control his strength. If something went wrong, he wouldn't be able to control it, right? No matter how strong you are, the Lord of the Abyss can't be unreasonable, right? However, Yuan Tianqin, who had a good plan in his heart, did not expect that Gu Xingyin, who was already a cripple in his eyes, had the same idea in his heart. Chapter 1467. Although the two sides hadn't met yet, they had been secretly looking forward to it for a long time. Finally, Gu Xingyin heard the voice she had been waiting for a long time. Next match, number 27 Gu Yuan versus number 38 Yuan Tianqin. Gu Xingyin calmly walked into the arena. In order to avoid Yuan Tianqin's suspicion, Lin Yuan hadn't appeared in the arena. However, Gu Xingyin knew that person must be watching her from somewhere not far away. At this time, Yuan Tianqin also stood in the arena. Yuan Qin stood closest to the arena, so she could act as Yuan Tianqin's mouthpiece at any time. Gu Xingyin smiled, raised her hand, and saluted. I've long heard of the Yuan family's genius. Yuan Tianqin just looked at her coldly. Yuan Qin said, there's no need to salute people from the 9 hells purgatory. Let's start. The competition has no eyes, so it's better to be careful. Gu Xingyin didn't get angry, as if she didn't hear Yuan Qin's threat. She just smiled and said, thank you for your concern, but I might not be able to control my emotions during the competition. You have to be careful too. Yuan Tianqin sneered, feeling sad for this little girl who didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He had seen her previous matches. Although she was indeed very strong, there was still a certain gap between her and him. Yuan Tianqin was almost certain that he could win this match. He glanced at Yuan Qin. Yuan Qin immediately said, since both sides admit that they might not be able to control their emotions during the competition, if something unexpected happens later, it's best that we don't blame each other. Yuan Qin's voice was very loud, so Gu Xingyin was sure that the judges and audience had heard it. She was still smiling as she nodded. When Yuan Tianqin turned around, a cold smile appeared on his lips. Gu Xingyin saw it. She was also laughing in her heart. You were waiting for this sentence, but how would you know that I was also waiting for you to say it? The competition officially began. Both sides summoned their beasts at the first moment. It was also a magical beast of the 9th rank. Yuan Tianqin's purple-winged thunder dragon was domineering and powerful, while the flame skylark behind Gu Xingyin was graceful. The situation was on the verge of breaking out. Actually, at their age, they were far from being able to fully control a magical beast of the 9th rank. But even if it was only a part of their strength, the power displayed by the two magical beasts of the 9th rank was still very impressive. Among the few matches today, this was the most interesting one. But was Gu Xingyin really unable to fully control a magical beast of the 9th rank? That was not the case. Summoners used their soul strength to determine their strength. In this aspect, there was probably no summoner in the entire continent of magical beasts that could compare to Gu Xingyin. She just liked to see her opponent pour a bucket of cold water over his head when he thought that victory was in his hands. Wasn't Yuan Tianqin arrogant? I'll let you enjoy yourself for a while. Later, she would tell him what true despair was. The two magical beasts in the field had already begun to fight. They were both magical beasts of the 9th rank that were famous for their attacks. Moreover, they were the natural enemies of birds and beasts on land. In addition, their respective masters hated each other. As soon as these two magical beasts started fighting, they didn't even try to test each other. They just put on a desperate posture. Gu Xingyin watched quietly. Ordinary people seemed to think that it was a tie, but in the eyes of people with discerning eyes, the flame skylark just looked intimidating. In fact, it was still slightly inferior to the purple-winged thunder dragon. Chapter 1468. The strength displayed by the raging flame skylark was indeed slightly inferior to the purple-winged thunder dragon. Even a few moments of carelessness caused her gorgeous feathers to be scratched off by the other party's claws. Yuan Tianqin's lips curled into a smile. He closed his eyes, and his mind moved slightly, as if issuing some order. At this moment, the purple-winged thunder dragon suddenly opened its mouth, and a huge purple lightning bolt struck towards the raging flame skylark. This lightning bolt was obviously menacing, and the raging flame skylark hurriedly dodged backwards. According to the normal development, this purple-winged thunder dragon should take advantage of the victory to pursue and attack, taking advantage of the raging flame skylark's flustered state to give a head-on blow. In this way, the outcome of this competition could basically be determined. But the purple-winged thunder dragon didn't do so. What Yuan Tianqin wanted was not just such a victory. The purple-winged thunder dragon's huge body suddenly turned in one direction, heading towards Gu Xingyin, who was looking worriedly at the raging flame skylark. A bolt of lightning comparable to the attack just now shot out from its mouth, and in the blink of an eye, it arrived in front of Gu Xingyin. Such a powerful attack, even a 9th-rank magical beast like the raging flame skylark with super strong defense, didn't dare to meet it head-on. If the summoner's weak body faced it, many people had quietly turned their heads away, unable to bear to see the next scene. Yuan Tianqin, on the other hand, stared unblinkingly in the direction of Gu Xingyin, and even a trace of excitement mixed with expectation appeared in his eyes. That bolt of lightning, without any accident, fell straight on top of Gu Xingyin's head. However, the scene of blood splattering out that everyone imagined did not appear. A soft silver-white halo appeared beside Gu Xingyin, blocking this fatal blow for her. When the light dissipated, a beautiful and elegant figure appeared beside Gu Xingyin. She had a graceful posture, beautiful hair, and gentle eyes as she quietly looked at the field. The most eye-catching thing was the huge jade-colored horn on her head. Unicorn. Some of the spectators had already recognized the species of this magical beast. At the front of the judging panel, the sharp-eyed judges immediately recognized that it was not only a unicorn, but also the king of unicorns, the Moonlight Unicorn. What's going on? Why would a saint beast suddenly appear here? While the judge was speaking, his fiery gaze was still fixed on the unicorn in the middle of the field. That was a saint beast. It was a saint-level magical beast that many high-level summoners yearned for, but never got to see in their entire lives. Only Yuan Tianqin didn't look good. Just now, he had almost succeeded. Referee, is this considered cheating? Yuan Qin said coldly to the referee at the side. When summoners competed, they could only fight with their summoned beasts. Gu Xingyin's summoned beast was obviously the fiery skylark. Even if she summoned a sacred beast, it would not change the fact that she had broken the rules. The referee was stunned for a moment, then he turned around and looked at Gu Xingyin seriously. I announce that because one of the contestants has broken the rules. Wait a minute. Gu Xingyin suddenly shouted. All eyes fell on her from all directions. Gu Xingyin slightly raised the corner of her lips and smiled arrogantly. Who said I cheated? Who set the rule that a summoner can only have one summoned beast? Chapter 1469. She raised her palm high up in the air. Everyone could clearly see that a mysterious array was shining in the center of her right palm. At the same time, the same array appeared on the forehead of the Moonlight Unicorn. In other words, this Moonlight Unicorn holy beast was really summoned by her. The crowd was in an uproar. A summoner could only summon one magical beast. This was a law that had been around for thousands of years. And now, this law had been broken. Everyone in the audience was looking at Gu Xingyin and the unicorn beside her. For a moment, no one cared about the outcome of this match. Yuan Tianqin looked at this scene with an ashen face. When he saw Gu Xingyin's right hand light up, he knew that no matter what, he had already lost in some aspects of this match. At this moment, Gu Xingyin raised her head and smiled at him. That laughter contained undisguised mockery and complacency, clearly mocking his previous thoughts. An unknown anger surged in his heart. Outside the arena, Yuan Qin looked at the referee and asked, Referee, the match hasn't ended yet. Please continue with your ruling. The referee was stunned for a moment. He clearly didn't expect Yuan Tianqin's side to take the initiative to request to continue the match. After all, in his mind, Gu Xingyin had one more summoned beast. Moreover, it was a holy beast, so the outcome was obvious. Yuan Tianqin also thought about it for a moment. Although the Moonlight Unicorn holy beast was powerful, it wasn't focused on attacking. It was more focused on speed and bringing good luck. In other words, it didn't have much attacking power. In that case, he didn't necessarily have no chance of winning. At this moment, Gu Xingyin spoke again. Young Master Yuan, are you sure we want to continue? She pointed at the Moonlight Unicorn beside her and the flaming skylark behind her. She smiled proudly. If we continue, we won't be fighting one-on-one anymore. She purposely emphasized the words, one-on-one, as if to emphasize something. Yuan Tianqin looked at her proud expression and tone and felt displeased. He simply ignored Gu Xingyin. Yuan Qin directly said to the referee, "Can we continue?" When the referee saw that neither of them had any intention of stopping, he could only announce the continuation of the match. At this time, the atmosphere in the field had reached its climax. Everyone was excitedly watching the 2-versus-1 battle in the field. There was even a legendary sacred beast participating in the battle. There were even spectators from other competition venues who rushed over after hearing the news. For a moment, there was a sea of people. Everyone's focus was on Gu Xingyin. Even the judges were sighing. No wonder they felt that something was wrong. The 9 Hells Purgatory had never produced a disciple before. It was impossible for them to produce a disciple this time. She was just an ordinary genius. So the surprise was waiting for him here. In the field, Gu Xingyin didn't rush to make a move. Instead, she said to Yuan Tianqin seriously, "If you really want to compete again, I won't hold back anymore." Yuan Tianqin's response was that the purple-winged thunder dragon behind him soared up, and purple lightning shot towards them. Gu Xingyin clicked her tongue and shook her head. "I already said not to be impulsive. When I get serious, even I am afraid of myself." She stretched out her right hand again. After the Moonlight Unicorn holy beast blocked the purple-winged thunder dragon's attack, everyone's eyes fell on Gu Xingyin. What was she going to do? Chapter 1470. Soon they knew what Gu Xingyin was going to do. This was because as the white lights lit up one after another, 3 figures appeared consecutively in the field. The people in the audience were stunned. Even the judges were so shocked by this scene that they were speechless. 9 nether soul-devouring beast, red flame beast, and blue-eyed golden-eyed beast. 3 holy beasts appeared in the field. Many people felt that there might be something wrong with their eyes. But it was fine if there was something wrong with their eyes. But could it be that there was something wrong with everyone's eyes? This, really, living in the legends, the magical beasts that ordinary people had only seen in ancient records in their lifetime, now all appeared in front of them. Most of them turned to look at Gu Xingyin in shock. Who was this girl who could summon so many high-level and even saint-level magical beasts? No wonder, with such strength, no wonder the 9 nether purgatory let her out. Not to mention that she summoned a bunch of saint-level magical beasts. Even if she summoned a bunch of low-level magical beasts, with the number, she could kill a lot of people. Gu Xingyin kept looking at Yuan Tianqin. The moment Yuan Tianqin saw these 3 magical beasts, his face became strange. He seemed to open his mouth, but how could Gu Xingyin give him a chance to admit defeat? She moved her divine soul, and the blue-eyed golden-eyed beast, which was as huge as a hill, roared. Only its roar could be heard in the whole field, and some people with weaker physiques were even directly shaken to the point that their faces turned pale. The judge naturally couldn't hear any other sound. At this moment, except for the Moonlight Unicorn, which had been quietly guarding Gu Xingyin, the other 4 top magical beasts directly used 4 killing moves in the direction of the purple-winged thunder dragon and Yuan Tianqin. The dust settled. Yuan Qin, who was standing outside the field, looked pale. She and Yuan Tianqin were connected mentally, and at this moment, she could feel that the connection between them was so weak that it almost didn't exist. What did this mean? It meant that Yuan Tianqin was now in a very bad state, and might even die at any time. Everyone was still in a state of shock. Seeing this scene, they didn't even react. It was Gu Xingyin who reminded the referee, who looked like he was sleepwalking. She seemed to be a little uneasy. "Referee, I already said that if I use my full strength, I won't be able to control them. After all, my soul force is limited. There are so many big fellows, and they won't listen to my orders." All the demonic beasts, yes, Master's acting skills were superb. Since their master had said so, these magical beasts naturally had to give face. Their eyes were cold and arrogant, as if they didn't put anyone in their eyes. At this moment, Gu Xingyin spoke up again, that, the eldest son of the Zhen family. She pointed at a crater that had been smashed into the ground. "You are lying." At this time, a sharp voice came from outside the arena. It was Yuan Qin, who had a crazy look on her face. She stared at Gu Xingyin and said, "Stop pretending. You're obviously trying to kill young Master Shao on purpose." Gu Xingyin had an innocent look on her face. She looked at Yuan Qin with a look of understanding. "Let's not talk about it anymore. Let the rescue team come in first," she said very understandingly. However, the rescue team stood outside the arena and looked at the 5 domineering magical beasts in the arena. They didn't dare to come in at all. This contestant herself said that she might not be able to control these magical beasts. What if they went in and encountered these magical beasts that were fierce? Chapter 1471. Therefore, the rescue workers all looked at the referee for help. The referee expressed that he was also quite helpless when he looked at those ferocious big guys just now. In the end, the referee and the rescue workers could only look at Gu Xingyin for help. Their thoughts in their hearts were like this: since this situation was caused by you, of course, you should be responsible for it. Under their burning gazes, Gu Xingyin could only, laboriously, recite a very tedious incantation, and then finally let these big guys of the magical beast world go back. Without the shocking pressure in the field, the rescue workers finally remembered their work and went to the field. But when they saw Yuan Tianqin, who was still at the bottom of the pit, they all gasped. This was just too tragic. When the rescue workers went forward, they couldn't help but reach out to check Yuan Tianqin's breath. To be honest, it was already a miracle that he was still alive. The representative of the Yuan family who came with Yuan Tianqin couldn't help but angrily complain, saying that Gu Xingyin had the intention to kill. In the face of the Yuan family's complaint, Gu Xingyin's face turned pale, and then she seemed to be very uncomfortable and directly fainted. A figure in red appeared beside her and held her firmly in his arms. Feeling the power in Gu Xingyin's body, Lin Yuan said to the referee indifferently, "She overexerted herself and fainted because her body couldn't support it." After saying that, he didn't waste any more time and said, "I'll take her back to rest." Then he disappeared. Referee, he could only announce that Gu Yuan from the 9 Hells Purgatory won this game. As soon as she returned to her courtyard, Gu Xingyin woke up. Lin Yuan couldn't help but laugh. "You are really too bad." Gu Xingyin said innocently, "I just don't want to face the Yuan family's unreasonable people." She knew very well what kind of moral conduct the Yuan family had. They had always only allowed others to do what they were allowed to do, and that was wrong. If she couldn't defeat Yuan Tianqin this time, she would either die or be disabled. If that was the case, the Zhen family would definitely say that the atmosphere on the stage was tense, and it was normal for them to be unable to hold back, or something along those lines. But if things turned out like this, and the person who fell was Yuan Tianqin, they would immediately change their attitude. All in all, they were pushing all the blame onto Gu Xingyin. Everything was the fault of the person who hurt her. Gu Xingyin, huh? Did he really think everyone was a fool? In the Zhen family's courtyard, several doctors surrounded the bed to check on Yuan Tianqin's condition. Not far away, the person in charge of the Yuan family's trip and some disciples were guarding the side. Seeing a doctor come out, the person in charge of the Yuan family, who had been anxious all this time, hurried forward and asked, "How is our first young master?" Hearing this, the doctor could only sigh. When the middle-aged man from the Yuan family saw this, his heart sank. The doctor continued, "With such injuries, it's already a miracle that first young master is still alive. But now, even if he can wake up, I'm afraid he can only spend the rest of his life in bed." In other words, Yuan Tianqin was crippled. Then, can first young master still be a summoner? The middle-aged man held on to the last glimmer of hope. It didn't matter if he couldn't move, the key was his talent. Chapter 1472. When the doctor heard this, he still shook his head. This time, not only was the eldest young master's body damaged, but his soul was also seriously injured, so, there was a strong sense of regret in the doctor's words. After all, the eldest young master of the Yuan family was absolutely amazing in terms of talent. Who would have thought that a summoner convention would cause him to suffer such an unexpected disaster? The middle-aged man felt as if he was struck by lightning. It's over, it's over. This was the only thought in his mind at the moment. In order to compete for the position of the leader of the team this time, he had spent a lot of energy and means. Because this time, anyone with a discerning eye could see that the eldest young master had a high chance of winning first place. Since that was the case, as the leader of the team, he would definitely be praised by the family. But who would have thought that something like this would happen halfway through? The middle-aged man felt that he was simply too unlucky. The most talented eldest young master in the family had become like this, and as the leader of the team, he actually didn't stop the other party from killing him. This was his fault in itself. But in that situation, the middle-aged man thought of the 5 magical beasts surrounding the girl and shuddered. In that case, even if he had rushed over, he was afraid that at most, there would be one more person lying on the bed. He was so irritated in his heart that when he sent the doctor away, he stuffed a large amount of red packets. Those doctors also knew what he meant, and they all said that they would never leak the news. The middle-aged man was right. Yuan Tianqin wasn't the only one from the younger generation of the Yuan family participating in the summoner convention this time. Although there were a few who weren't as good as Yuan Tianqin, they were still rare geniuses. If those people could achieve good results, when he returned to the family, his life would be better. Therefore, he had to hide the fact that Yuan Tianqin was crippled, including the Yuan family. Except for his own few talents, he had to hide the rest of the Yuan family members who came with him. Especially the other younger generation of the Yuan family, he absolutely couldn't let them know, so as not to affect their performance in the future. But things often didn't go as planned. The middle-aged man hadn't even thought of how to announce the eldest young master's injury to the outside world yet, but rumors had already spread. They said that Yuan Tianqin was dead, that Yuan Tianqin was crippled, and that the Yuan family was probably done for this time, and that they would never be able to stand up again. There were all kinds of words. What depressed the middle-aged man the most was that the Yuan clan's old ancestor, who was in seclusion, had heard the news from somewhere and rushed over personally. The middle-aged man was so scared that he didn't even dare to breathe. However, Yuan family's old ancestor wasn't in the mood to take it to heart. After he personally went to see Yuan Tianqin, his face was so gloomy that it could drip water. Tell me in detail, what exactly is going on? The Yuan family's ancestor's expression was extremely ugly. The middle-aged man carefully recounted the entire process of the competition, not leaving out even the slightest detail. Even though he already knew the gist of the situation, the Yuan family's old ancestor was still infuriated when he heard the entire story from the middle-aged man. What a waterside lord, what a Yuan Tianyi! How merciless! The Yuan family's old ancestor snorted coldly as the solid wooden armrest he was holding on to shattered into powder. The middle-aged man lowered his head deeply. Yuan Tianyi? Chapter 1473. The middle-aged man was the son of the law enforcement elder and a direct descendant of the Yuan family. He knew a little about what happened that year. He had heard the name of the third Miss, Yuan Tianyi, from his father. Not only that, he had also heard a secret from his father. It was a secret that he had never heard of before. The third Miss, Yuan Tianyi, had awakened the bloodline of an ancient summoner. The law enforcement elder hadn't told him anything else. He vaguely remembered that he was shocked back then. But later, the third Miss, Yuan Tianyi, had mysteriously disappeared from the Yuan family, and he had gradually forgotten the name. Now, hearing the old ancestor's tone, and thinking of how the girl named Gu Yuan had summoned the 5 magical beasts with a wave of her hand, the middle-aged man silently suppressed the shock in his heart. Until the old ancestor left. He couldn't help but gasp. Could it be that Gu Yuan was the third Miss Yuan Tianyi? The Yuan family disciples present had been ordered not to spread what had happened in the Yuan family's cultivation hall. They didn't know what exactly had happened, but they had tried to find out some information. It was said that the third Miss and the eldest young master had a conflict. At that time, the Yuan family of course chose the eldest young master and gave up on the third Miss. No one felt that this choice was wrong. After all, in their eyes, the eldest young master was the future of the Yuan family, and the third Miss, Yuan Tianyi, was just a dispensable existence. But now? The middle-aged man remembered yesterday's red dress fluttering in the wind, and the giant magical beast circling her with a wave of her hand. Then he remembered the eldest young master who was still lying unconscious on the bed. He sighed, thinking that the family's decision back then was really wrong. The girl's name was Gu Yuan, not Yuan Tianyi, and she didn't show any mercy when facing the eldest young master. It was obvious that the third Miss no longer had any feelings for the Yuan family. The middle-aged man shook his head. No matter what, the original decision had been made, and now there was an irreconcilable conflict between the third Miss and the Yuan family. It was the old ancestor and the family head who should think about what to do. It was better for him to be an honest person who didn't know anything. The old ancestor of the Yuan family went directly to the place where Lin Yuan and Gu Xingyin were staying. But they refused to see him. Go and tell the person that we're very busy and we're not familiar with each other. There's nothing to see, Gu Xingyin said slowly to the person who came to report. That person was a housekeeper that they had conveniently bought when they bought this courtyard. As an ordinary person, he didn't even know what the Yuan clan's old ancestor represented, so it was only natural for him to reject the offer. The Yuan family's old ancestor's face turned ashen. He didn't enter the door directly but had someone announce his arrival. This was already giving the host a lot of face. The old ancestor of the Yuan family thought that he had already lowered his stance, but he didn't expect the other party to be so arrogant. Since that was the case, the meeting he had prepared was meaningless. Seeing that the face of the ordinary person in front of him had turned pale because of his aura, the old ancestor of the Yuan clan harumphed coldly and turned around to leave. He wasn't so low as to make things difficult for an ordinary person. But Abyssal Lord, and that Yuan Tianyi who had no respect for her family, the Yuan family's old ancestor narrowed his eyes. He would make them pay. Gu Xingyin didn't need to guess to know what the Yuan family's old ancestor was thinking. These villains' cannon fodder always had these thoughts running through their minds. Chapter 1474. To be honest, Gu Xingyin wasn't afraid of the Yuan family at all. Although the Yuan family was powerful, they only had one peak saint expert, their forefather. He wasn't Lin Yuan's match at all. That aside, Gu Xingyin herself had been in the Nine Hells Purgatory for a long time. She had lived in the Nine Hells Purgatory for 10 years, and because her aura was extremely similar to that of the goddess of nature, she had attracted the attention of many magical beasts. Quite a few of them had been tricked by her for food, such as the moonlight unicorn. Gu Xingyin could create any plant she'd ever seen before. As someone who'd once become the goddess of nature, no one knew the plants of this world better than her. Thus, she could easily find out which tasty fruits were most popular with magical beasts. Nine Hells Purgatory had always been a place lacking in plants. It was only after Gu Xingyin's arrival that it slowly transformed into an otherworldly paradise. Other things aside, Gu Xingyin had already contracted many saint-level magical beasts. If she summoned any of them, the Yuan family's forefather wouldn't be able to deal with them in a short time. That was the source of her confidence. The Yuan family couldn't do anything to her. If you ask me, if the Yuan family doesn't have eyes, I'll find a time to. A cold glint flashed through Lin Yuan's eyes. The ruler of Nine Hells Purgatory had never been a kind person. If he were, he wouldn't have been able to control those disobedient magical beasts. Bystanders saw his gentleness, but they didn't know that it was only because Gu Xingyin was standing in front of him. Gu Xingyin looked at him helplessly. Don't talk about exterminating people at the drop of a hat. To be honest, I don't have any deep grudges with the Yuan family. Those who did have grudges with me, Yuan Tianqin and Yuan Qin, have both been crippled. If the Yuan family stops now, there's no need for us to push our luck. After all, most of the Yuan family hadn't even heard of her name, much less had any grudges against her. Lin Yuan. Playing with her fair and soft fingers. Lazily, he said, "You're always so soft-hearted. You're like this to these humans, and you're also like this to those magical beasts. Therefore, those magical beasts love to play with Gu Xingyin, and even rubbed against her body one by one." Thinking of this, Lin Yuan felt very unhappy. What if they don't stop? Gu Xingyin smiled, but the smile was cold no matter how one looked at it. They don't know what's good for them. Of course, we don't have to show mercy. It was true that she wasn't bloodthirsty, but that didn't mean that she wouldn't fight back when she was bullied. Hopefully, the Zhen family would be aware of this. Ever since the fight with Yuan Tianqin, Gu Yuan's name had become famous. All the contestants were secretly praying that they wouldn't have to face her. What a joke. If he were to go up against another participant, he might still stand a chance. Even if he were to lose, he would at least be able to make it look good. If he were to face this person, if a few saint beasts unleashed their ultimate attacks, who would be able to block them? If they didn't believe it, it was said that the eldest son of the Yuan family was still lying in bed. And according to the news, the eldest son could only lie in bed for the rest of his life. Therefore, every time Gu Xingyin went up on the stage, before she could summon her opponent would show an ugly face and admit defeat. Since they were going to lose anyway, they might as well save their strength to deal with other opponents. This was what everyone thought. Therefore, Gu Xingyin went all the way to the end without any hindrance. Everyone didn't know whether to laugh or cry at this scene, but no one blamed those who gave up. Chapter 1475. After all, he would only lose face if he admitted defeat. However, if he continued to fight, he would lose his life. Yuan Qing did not look too good. He was from a collateral branch of the Yuan family. He was accepted into the main family because he was talented. However, while his talent was good in other places, it wasn't that outstanding in the Yuan clan, where geniuses were as common as clouds. There were many people like him who could enjoy treatment that others could not. However, he did not have a strong presence in the Yuan family. When he found out that his opponent was Gu Yuan, who had defeated the eldest young master, Yuan Qing roared in his heart. He was prepared to admit defeat. He was not stupid. Even the eldest young master was no match for Gu Yuan. What was the point of him going up against him? Besides having another cannon fodder, it was meaningless. However, Yuan Qing did not expect that he would be summoned by the patriarch of the Yuan family. The patriarch was a legendary figure in their family. Yuan Qing went to see the patriarch excitedly. However, the patriarch only said one sentence and it made him feel cold. "You are not allowed to admit defeat in the battle between you and Gu Yuan tomorrow." The patriarch did not care about the feelings of a collateral branch disciple. After he finished speaking, he asked his people to leave. Yuan Qing returned to his room in a daze. Soon, someone brought him a lot of treasures. The person in charge of delivering the treasures said enviously that the treasures were from the patriarch and asked him to perform well in the battle tomorrow. Perform well? A bitter smile appeared on Yuan Qing's face. What did it mean that he was not allowed to admit defeat against an opponent like Gu Yuan? Yuan Qing did not understand if the patriarch did not want him to admit defeat because he did not want to lose face, or if the patriarch wanted to use him to achieve something. He only knew that he might lose his life in the battle tomorrow. He sat on the chair in a daze. For the first time, he was dissatisfied with the cold Yuan family. Gu Xingyin also knew who her opponent was. Another member of the Yuan family? What a coincidence. Judging from the name, it should be a collateral branch disciple of the Yuan family. The battle was coming soon. There were many spectators for this battle. Some of them were even here for Gu Xingyin. They wanted to see what a summoner who could summon multiple magical beasts was like. Yuan Qing stood on the stage and looked at the girl opposite him. She was only in her 20s and was dressed in an extremely dazzling red robe. Her black hair was tied up high and her exquisite and bright face was indescribably flamboyant and unbridled. That's right. For someone like her, no matter how unbridled she was, it wouldn't be overboard. Gu Xingyin glanced at Yuan Qing. She did not know her. However, for someone to be able to reach this step, his strength would definitely not be weak. Both sides greeted each other according to the rules. The referee subconsciously waited for Yuan Qing to admit defeat. He was already used to it. Gu Yuan's matches were the most relaxed among all the matches that he had hosted. Because, there was no need to do anything at all. But soon, he heard the roar of a magical beast. The judge turned around and saw that it was the contestant from the Yuan family who had summoned his beast. Did he not intend to admit defeat? Gu Xingyin was clearly surprised as well. She raised her eyebrows and summoned the blazing skylark without hesitation. Given Yuan Qing's strength, the blazing skylark was enough. When Yuan Qing saw that Gu Xingyin had only summoned one magical beast,